If your job at a healthcare facility includes disinfecting against viruses, you know prevention is the best medicine, and maintaining healthy spaces starts with a healthy cleaning routine. Grainger's world-class supply chain helps ensure you have the quality products you need when you need them, from disinfectants and cleaning supplies to personal protective equipment, so you can help deliver a clean bill of health. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Betting on sports can be hard, but hiring Morgan & Morgan is easy. Morgan & Morgan is America's largest injury firm. They have over 100 offices nationwide and more than 1,000 lawyers. Their fee is free until they win. Find out more information at forthepeople.com/bestbets or dial pound law, that is pound 529 from your cell phone, and that is FOR, thepeople.com/bestbets. This is a paid advertisement. And warm and friendly hello, welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. We've got an excellent podcast for you. We're going to be joined in segment number 2 by Blake Lovell, who does such tremendous work over at Southeastern 16. We're going to talk with him about the great start to the season that we've seen for the SEC as a whole. We'll take a look forward to the ACC-SEC Challenge, dive in on those big games for Tuesday, and just whether or not Auburn should be the number one team in all of college basketball entering into this ACC-SEC Challenge. So we'll talk about that and so much more. Then in the final segment, going to get you guys picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Tuesday as we hit some bank shots. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one or two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at GNN_D1. Keep in mind, large CM, they mean does not matter. So as per usual, please send these into the timeline. Other way is via an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Did not get in any Twitter/X questions today, but we had a short but fun slate in college basketball Monday. Let's take a look back at it, try to find some trends, and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
Without top scorers, Cedric Coward, Washington State became a double-figure underdog, and they get the job done outright on the money line against Nevada, 68-57. Something to watch out for. Nevada, they were shooting north of 46% from three-point range entering into this game. These teams with these heavy outliers to the positive or the negative. Now we're going to see regression start to set in as Nevada went 4 of 20 from three-point range. They played even up on the glass. They played even up in the turnover department, but they just weren't able to make those threes as Kobe Sanders, he supplied the team with 14 points. Washington State, meanwhile, goes 12 of 29 from three-point range. LaJuan Watts was able to supply the team with 17 points. Team did a relatively solid job of having a pair of guys in Watts along Nate Kalmezi combined for 13 assists as well. So they find a way to get it done. Georgetown has been covering quite a few numbers. They did not cover their first 2 games of the season and was less than savory against Notre Dame a few weeks ago, but win and cover against UMBC 86-62 as a defense has really been stepping up, and if you like me, had the over, and this was not great three-point shooting by either team. They go a combined 7 of 38 from three-point range, but Thomas Sorber, he is soaring in terms of my freshman rankings, in terms of best freshman in all of college basketball. 23 points, 3 blocks, 8 rebounds. He has really been good for this team, and for UMBC, not a lot doing out there in the backcourt for them. Not a lot doing for this team either, as for our good friends in Drexel, they lose at home to Bryant. This by a count of 78-73 for Bryant. They go just 4 of 17 from three-point range, but they go 20 of 31 at the free throw line. Drexel 8 of 14 at the charity stripe. Yami Butler, he supplied the team with 28 points, but not a lot outside that end for Bryant. They win the turnover battle by a count of 11-6 with 31 points out of Rafael Pinzon, who went 11 of 17 from the floor. So a nice win out there. A nice cover by Pacific as well. They don't get the outright win, but they hang in there with Buffalo. This by a count of 75-66 for Pacific. Still rough with their three-point shooting. Just 4 of 16 from distance in this one. Colorado bailed out by their 9 of 21 three-point shooting, and Andre Yagmoski being able to splash 4 of 7 of his three-point shots, 17 points. You did have a double-double from Trevor Baskin as well. 13 points, 10 boards, 3 blocks as well. So Baskins-Robbins was open for supply in this one and open for getting just completely butt-kicked picked was Chicago State. They close in a lot of places right around about 20, 21-point underdogs. They do not cover as St. Thomas puts up a 98 spot, 98-76 the final, a game that saw a combined 62 free throw attempts, by the way, and St. Thomas won 30 of 35 at the charity stripe. You had nobody on St. Thomas, by the way, despite scoring 98 points, score above 13 points in this game. So sharing was very much caring for them. So they get the job done in Operation Fade. Chicago State looks like it's back in full force, and for compensate, right now looking like one of the most brutal offenses in all of college basketball, 68-57. They get butt kicked by Loyola of Maryland. You saw Miami of Ohio all over Air Force. It's been a rough year for Air Force. 73-60 the final as Air Force loses this game despite going 10 of 22 from three-point range, but they allowed Miami of Ohio to shoot north of 56% from the floor as Peter Suter, 42 of Miami of Ohio's 73 points in this one. He did it all by himself. 17 of 21 from the floor, even threw in there 3 steals for good measure as well. So a heck of a performance out there, and a good performance from Southeast Louisiana. They go on the road. They get the job done outright on the money line against Tulane, 71-67, as we saw quite a few underdogs triumph on this day. Southeast Louisiana, 8 of 20 from three-point range. Tulane, 13 of 33 from three. So both of these teams rock solid on that front. But where Southeast Louisiana won this game down low, they win the rebound battle, 38-32, as Ja'Cavion Buckley gave the team 18 points, 4 steals, 6 assists, 4 rebounds. So he stuffed the stat sheet there. And Cam Burton comes in off the bench, 4 of 8 from three-point range. You also saw Old Dominion as an underdog get it done outright on the money line against both William and Mary. America's favorite tag team loses by a count of 88-83 for Old Dominion. They won the rebound battle, 40-28, as Stephon Walker had 13 boards, 6 assists, 10 points, really carried the team as the Old Dominion Monarchs go 9 of 21 from 3. And for William and Mary, I do think that this is a team that is transitioning in a positive way with Noah Collier giving you 18 points, but a little bit of a work in progress, going from one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball to one of the most up-tempo teams in all of college basketball. Yay, verily, for Mississippi Valley State, who got a win. They played NAIA Oakwood out there in Huntsville, Alabama, that by a count of 91-71. So we appreciate the wins when we can see them, and this was a win for Rhode Island, 84-78. They take it to Yale. For Yale, they go just 4 of 18 from three-point range. In this one, John Polakidis still finds a way to be able to supply the team with 25 points. And if you, like me, had the under, you needed these two teams to avoid scoring 14-plus points in the final 49 seconds, and that did not happen, as the late game fouling was very overwhelming there. Yes, I do speak on that in a little bit of saltiness, but that said, David Green, 26 points, 9 boards. He goes 6 of 11 from three-point range, and Rhode Island, they went 27 of 30 at the free throw line, so they were able to knock down their free throws. In UT Arlington, they knocked down Louisiana Monroe, this by a count of 84-70, as UT Arlington really cranking up their tempo, and they're bombing it from three. 15 out of 34 from three-point range, with Jackson Ellingsworth coming off the bench. He had 16 big points, and Lance Ware, the former top 50 recruit, he supplied the team with 17 as well. And if you're looking at college basketball and what we saw as a whole, again, on Monday, we saw a lot of those money line underdogs being able to cash outright as just underdogs in general. They went 6-6 against the spread, but they also went 4-8 on the money line. So they were able to give you some nice cashes there. You saw 6 overs and 6 unders yesterday as things are starting to normalize with regards to these trends. 635 overs to 624 unders over the last 7 days. So overall for the season, a 50.4% hit rate to the overs, but favorites have had a really rough run of it. Favorites sitting at just 47.7% for the season, 599, 657, and 19 against the spread. Meanwhile, over the last 7 days in college basketball, underdogs sitting at 54.3%, 158, 133, and 6 against the spread, with overs and unders, 148 overs, 148 unders over the last 7 days. So very even there, and that's what we're all seeing trend-wise in college basketball. Coming up next, how about if we take a look at the ACC-SEC Challenge, the SEC as a whole, and Tuesday's games with Blake Lovell right here on Let's Go Seats with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the Beast and Family Podcast. And we're back to lovely Las Vegas for Let's Seats with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the Beast and Family Podcast, and it's always great to be joined by this man as we've got Blake Lovell aboard. He does such a tremendous job over at Southeastern 16. Taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. I know that he has been hard at work taking a look at all that we've been getting in college basketball, does an amazing job with it, and now we're hitting his time of year as we are going to be approaching the ACC-SEC Challenge for what has been a great start to the year for the SEC, and you're able to follow Blake on Twitter/X at the Blake Lovell altogether. And Blake, It's always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks as always for having me, Greg.
Thank you for joining me, Blake. And Blake, just what have you made out of the SEC thus far this season? Because I know that John Rothstein put out there a tweet, and I will try to dig it up real quick, but it was just outlining how much better the SEC has been in games against power conference teams than any other team, as they have been 29-13 in these games going into Sunday. The ACC, who they face off against, has been 12-28, and really other than the Big Ten being 21-14, all the other conferences have struggled while the SEC has thrived.
Yeah, they have for sure. And I think, if you recall the conversations we've had the past several seasons, we've always talked about, well, the SEC could be really good this year. And then by season's end, sure, you have quite a few teams that make the tournament, but we always kind of looked at the non-conference and said, for the most part, the SEC had left a lot of sort of opportunities on the table. If you go back to even, some of the top tier teams in some of those games, the last couple of years, you're thinking, all right, the league just did not get enough of those just great wins outside of, the wins you were going to accumulate in a tough conference. And so this year, it has just been the complete opposite. I mean, it has almost been a case where you're surprised if the SEC doesn't win, these kind of games. Whereas, Alabama beating Oregon, wouldn't have been surprised if it happened. Oregon wins the game and you're thinking, wow, how did the SEC not get that one? Because the trend has just been, well, they usually win these games. And so when you've seen a couple of these teams lose these sort of top tier games, that has been the outlier, because everyone else, whether it's Auburn, whether it's Tennessee, Kentucky getting a win over Duke, Oklahoma, look at what they've done. They've been a surprise team. So there are just so many big wins that have been racked up. And I think this week, as we go into the SEC-ACC challenge, the SEC is going to be favored in the majority of these games without question. And it's really going to be a matter of seeing maybe how many the ACC can steal.
Yep, with the ACC, it's been relatively rough for them. And how about you take a look at the ACC, for lack of a better term, of being just a little bit of a top-heavy conference? Because Duke and North Carolina, they've looked relatively rock solid, though North Carolina might want to have better first halves because they've been playing really well in the second half. The first half, not so much, but how much you just take a look at those two teams being really dominant and then the rest of the conference just being sort of mediocre right now?
Yeah, I think that's been the way it's worked. And, again, it's kind of funny because you could say that about the SEC some years. It hasn't been the case this year at all. But, yeah, you see kind of what the top-tier teams are doing in the ACC. We kind of know what to expect from these, games involving Duke and North Carolina. Pitt's got an interesting game against Mississippi State. But, those are clearly the top teams. And, of course, Clemson gets a big opportunity hosting Kentucky, who we know has been red hot. They're a top 5 team. I think you've seen, some ups and downs at times with Louisville. I know an injury situation, could factor into the long-term outlook with this Louisville team. But everybody else, sure, like you said, you've seen some good, but you've also seen some surprisingly bad, right? I mean, it's a case of Miami losing as many games in a row as some other teams that, like, okay, what is Syracuse? What is Virginia? Teams like that are used to kind of being, around that mark, but you just sort of not seen it yet for them to be able to make that jump. It's going to be interesting, I think, for the ACC the rest of the season. And, that's what we talk about too, Greg, right? And depending on what the ACC looks like, it's very important for teams like Pitt and Clemson and Louisville and teams like that to get big wins in this challenge and, for the rest of the non-conference schedule, because once you get into conference play, if we look at it right now, those quality win opportunities in the ACC, there are not a ton of those outside of just those top tier teams you mentioned.
No, there really are not. And we could see a team like Louisville be able to rise up. I like what I saw out of them over the weekend, but Wake Forest has been much more disappointing than I was anticipating. Miami has just been a complete dumpster fire as well. And I think that that's going to be so important in this ACC versus SEC challenge. As Blake Lovell does great work over at Southeastern 16, joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops. And I look at a game like Arkansas versus Miami, where Arkansas is right now the 3.5 to 4 point favorite. And I'm not sure how you view this, but the SEC being able to get true road wins, I think is going to be so big because a team like Miami has really struggled this year. Matter of fact, they just lost on their home floor to Charleston Southern. But as we know, these are environments that are very difficult to play in. And for a lot of these SEC teams, this will be their first true taste of playing a true road game.
Yeah, and I think, you talk about two teams that have had some interesting discussions so far in terms of where they stand. Yes, Arkansas sits in a better spot in terms of the record, but we know, offensively, they have left a lot to be desired to this point. And I keep saying, Greg, if I'm anyone playing Arkansas, I would be zone defense on every single possession to make them beat me from outside, because I think that is going to eventually be, one of the biggest weaknesses for them offensively. I think their numbers are a little bit deceiving when you consider that, their best performance has come against Maryland Eastern Shore, in a, whatever that was, a 74-point win or something like that. That is in terms of their perimeter shooting. And so, they're not fully healthy. I think that's clear. Jonas Adu has, played less than 30, 40 minutes combined this season. We were not expecting that. So clearly there's an injury situation still going on there. He's only played in 4 of their 7 games, hasn't played more than 11 minutes. You've got John L. Davis, who we thought Greg was going to just be maybe first team all SEC type guy coming in. He has struggled in terms of giving them the offensive production they need. And I think, again, part of that may be due to the wrist injury that he's had that seems to just be nagging. Trevon Brazile, same situation in terms of the injury kind of lingering. He's not played a ton over the past several weeks. And so this Arkansas team, who was already kind of not the deepest team out there, is dealing with injuries. And now they've got to go on the road and play an absolutely desperate Miami team who, like you said, has lost 4 in a row, just lost to Charleston Southern, and now gets a huge opportunity. And I think Miami has at least enough experience and good offensive play at times to be able to win this game. And that's why, it may be a little surprising that Arkansas is only favored by, several points here. But I'm curious, Greg, I think this is a dangerous game for Arkansas, playing a team that is really needing to win a game here badly. And meanwhile, you can imagine the panic button being hit in Fayetteville, Arkansas with John Calipari's Razorbacks if they were to lose this game.
Oh, there's no question about it. This is going to be such an interesting game for really both of these teams. And there's a lot of intriguing games. They're going to be going down the ACC versus SEC challenge. And I do think that we've got ourselves a few very clear ones that are going to be sort of rubber meets the road games as well. Like with Georgia, they're currently an 8.5 to a 9-point favorite against Notre Dame. It's going to be interesting to see how they play without Marcus Burton being out there for them. Oklahoma being a big favorite against Georgia Tech. And how much you just take a look at this ACC-SEC challenge, and for lack of a better term, these SEC teams being able to take care of business and get the job done, because we're seeing on the card for the games for Tuesday a lot of big favorites with regards to the SEC, saying it's like 1 or 2 games.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like, over the past, when we talk about these challenges, before it was the SEC Big 12 challenge, now it's been the SEC-ACC challenge. You've talked about it being, a land of opportunity for the SEC. This year, it's sort of a land of don't miss here. Like, make sure you win these games, because otherwise, then you start to maybe scratch your head a little bit, because the conference simply has been that dominant to this point. And again, I think they'll be favored. I'm pretty sure, Greg, the way I've seen it now as we're recording, I think the SEC's favored in the Tuesday games in all but one game, and that is Louisville being a 3 or 3.5 point favorite against Ole Miss. So just think about that setup right there. And that tells you all you need to know, I think, about where the two conferences are at. It'll be different on the Wednesday games when you get into, teams like Alabama and Auburn having to go on the road to Duke and North Carolina. I think there's another game in there too where I wouldn't be surprised. Maybe it's the Pitt Mississippi State game, or you could see maybe Pitt as a slight favorite on the road. Yep, Louisville, Ole Miss. I mean, I think when you look at it from that standpoint, it just tells you that because of where some of these ACC teams are at, these would start to get into bad loss territory for some of these SEC teams. And so, like you said, take care of the business, because, you certainly have a lot more to lose in this position now, because you are now at the top. Whereas before, we've talked about the SEC being in that conversation. Are they the second best conference, third best conference, whatever? The SEC has clearly been the best conference through 1 month of the season. Now you have to win these kind of games to keep it going.
Yep, and I think that the real competitive games are actually going to be coming on Wednesday, Blake, because that's when we get Auburn going to Cameron Indoor to play against Duke, Alabama going on the road to play against North Carolina. And I feel like for Tuesday, it's sort of survive in advance, find a way to be able to get the job done. I think Wednesday is when we really get that sizzle, though, especially with an Auburn team that we saw what they were able to do at Maui. And I'm hard-pressed to say that any team has looked more impressive in college basketball this far than an Auburn team that's already taken down Houston. We saw what they were able to do at the Maui Invitational. And heck, even if you want to go back to that Vermont game, they took down UAB to start the season, Vermont did, and then they dump trucked them by 40-plus points. This Auburn team has just crossed all their T's, dotted all their I's. I'm really not seeing any weaknesses with their game right now.
Yeah, my money, Auburn's the best team in the country right now, just in terms of what they've done. I know people can argue whether Kansas is there, and of course they are. They're right there with them. But I think I would take Auburn on a neutral court right now over Kansas. I just think they're their best team. They've done the most so far when you consider, like you said, even take a win over Vermont, beating them by 50 points. That also tells you something, in addition to beating Houston and Iowa State and North Carolina and Memphis, winning all those games away from home. And I think that is what is most interesting to me. Because remember, Greg, the conversation we've had with Auburn, more so maybe last year, I don't remember the recent years before that, but it was how are they going to win games away from home? Because they had struggled at times. They have such a great home court advantage in the jungle. but how are they going to win games away from home? And consistently, they struggled a bit at that, specifically last year. But now you look at a situation where they've already built up all this confidence in winning these kind of games. Now, this is your first true road game in terms of playing it at Cameron, and you know what the crowd's going to be like. You know how tough Duke is to beat there. But like you said, if we're trying to identify what's the one weakness that Auburn is going to have going into this game, I can't find one. I still think that they are just completely rock solid in pretty much every area. If you look statistically, sure, you could say, well, they're allowing opponents to shoot 34% from three. That's not the greatest, knowing that Duke is going to be able to certainly put up some points from there, and they're going to take quite a few shots from three. We know that. But I just think overall the physicality of Auburn, can Duke handle that? Because they are going to be physical. We know Auburn kind of has a swagger to them right now. They're playing with a ton of confidence. It's going to be a tough game to win. But I don't know how I could sit here and say with any confidence that I'm going to just make Duke the clear favorite, because Auburn has just proven time and time again at this point that they are meeting the challenge, and they feel like, to me, the number one team in the country right now.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And am I off base by saying that Mr. Broom should be right now the favorite in terms of player of the year? Because I've been saying that on the podcast for the last few days. I just take a look at the game of Johnny Broom, and he's doing everything. He's out popping it from three. He's doing a great job on the glass. He's scoring. He's a good passer for a big man. I just haven't found a single player that I like their game more than Johnny Broom right now.
There is no one in the game, in my opinion, that has been more impactful or more dominant through 7-8 games than Broom. I think, again, if you want to make the argument that Auburn is the best team in the country, 1A, 1B with Kansas, however you want to do it, I think this guy is number one. I don't think there is a 1A, 1B. I think he's the best player in the country right now, because, again, if you just watch the games, you can look at the stat sheet and be wowed alone, right? You can look at all the stats and say, oh, yeah, he just, had 21 points and 16 rebounds, 6 assists, 4 blocks against Memphis. And you just keep going down the line, and you look at all the production this guy has in multiple areas. It's not just, maybe a traditional big man where it's like, okay, he gets a double-double. No, he's adding 6 assists, 5 assists, 4 blocks, 3 blocks, and you just keep going down the line. He does everything. And again, if you go beyond the stat sheet and actually watch how he's played in these games, he has been an absolute stud. And yes, to this point, like we said, it's a long season, but if we just go by what we've seen, I think he's the best player in the country, in addition to, Auburn looking like the best team in the country at this point.
Yep, no doubt about it. I have loved what he's been able to do. I love what this Auburn team has been able to do. And then how about if we talk about an Alabama team where things have been a bit wobbly for them? They lose that game to Oregon out there in lovely Las Vegas. They were able to right the ship in that game against Illinois, but we know that they lose that game against Purdue as well. Another tough road test, and Nate Oates, he does not shy away from a challenge. You can say what you want about Alabama losing these games. They're not losing to nobodies, that's for sure. But how do you take a look at this North Carolina versus Alabama game? Because I talk about that, and I mentioned this a bit before as well. North Carolina's played really well in the second half of games. They have gotten off to a lot of shaky starts, though, as well.
You're the betting guy, Greg, but I feel confident in feeling like that over is going to be very tempting for a lot of people in this game, because these two teams are going to put up points. We know that with the way that these two play. I think defensively, both of them leave a little bit to be desired. They're also two teams that don't really turn the other team over. So that tells me that you're going to get these two offensive juggernauts getting what they want. And that could be a problem in terms of, if you're trying to see exactly how this game's going to play out defensively for both sides. But I don't know of concern, and maybe that is too strong of a word for this scenario with Alabama, because they have beaten Houston. They've beaten Illinois. They've beaten a good McNeese team, I think. Arkansas State, that's a good mid-major team too. Got a gritty sort of win over Rutgers. Let's call it what it is. They lost to Oregon by 2 and lost on the road at Purdue. No shame in that. But I do look at Alabama now. And, Chris Youngblood, we've been waiting to see if he's going to make his return. It sounds like that is coming pretty soon. I think he will be a big addition for them, especially defensively, to really help them out there. But you also know, Greg, the Latrell Wrightsell injury against Oregon, non-contact thing. We haven't gotten an update, but I know Nate Oates did use that word concern about an Achilles injury. It was non-contact. That would worry me a little bit. He's kind of been a three-point sharpshooter for this team. And we also know that Mark Sears has not exactly had his best performances recently. He was one of 11 from 3 in that game against Oregon. And, we talk about the game where he didn't score against Illinois. They still won by 13. I think Alabama's going to be fine. But right now, they find themselves in the middle of this brutal schedule and, not really going to let up, because they play Creighton at home, 10 days from now or something, I think, in Tuscaloosa on December 14th. So it's going to be a bit challenging, I think, moving forward from Alabama. But this is a big test, because this does feel like a team that if Alabama plays their game, they should be able to beat, I think, North Carolina. But it's all about this game's in Chapel Hill. It's going to be difficult. And whether you have a strong feeling one side or the other on who's going to win, you're going to get your entertainment value, I think, out of this game, the way these two teams play.
Oh, no doubt about it. We are. And Blake, I do want to leave this one a little bit open-ended. Just who is the team in the SEC outside of perhaps Auburn? Because for Auburn, we both thought that they were going to be good. I don't know if anyone thought that they were going to be this good. That has been the most pleasant surprise to you, because I don't think that there's been many bad surprises thus far, aside from perhaps South Carolina that lost early on in the season against North Florida. But that said, who's been your most pleasant surprise out of Auburn thus far this season? Because I just noted the numbers a few minutes ago at the SEC and how they have just been pulverizing all the other power conference teams.
It's really impossible, Greg, to narrow it to one, but I will do that and quickly mention, a couple others that I think maybe are either not being talked about enough or they are a team that really just came out of nowhere. Look, did I think Kentucky would be in the top 5 this quickly in Mark Pope's era? No. So I think Kentucky probably has to be in there. I don't think Florida's getting enough love. I know they're moving up in the polls and all that, but they have not really played the toughest schedule. And I think that's why people are kind of, holding back on Florida. But I think they have been an absolute machine to this point. But the team I will go with is Oklahoma, because I came into the season tempted, Greg, very tempted to put Oklahoma at number 16 in my preseason power rankings in a 16-team conference, because I just did not know what to make of this roster. I just did not have a good feel on what I thought they could be in year one in the SEC, kind of knowing what the expectations were going to be for a lot of these other teams, which a lot of these other teams have exceeded my expectations. But you look at what they did this past week at Feast Week, getting a win over Providence where they tried to give that game away at the end, but they won the game. And then to just come back from that, a very sloppy finish to that game against Providence, beat Arizona, beat Louisville. And now they're sitting here at 7-0, going into very winnable games over the next couple of weeks. Georgia Tech, Alcorn State, Oklahoma State, and they've got that interesting one against Michigan before Christmas. But you're looking at an Oklahoma team here that I know they didn't play the toughest schedule the first couple of weeks, but to get those kind of wins, that tells me this team's got something. And they've got a lot of experience, and I think the shooting, the three-point shooting on this team, I feel like may only get better from here. And they're shooting 37.5% right now. Jeremiah Fears has been fantastic. And I think, again, you're looking at a team, too, when they get fully healthy, like Oklahoma is a problem already. And I just think they have been the biggest surprise to this point. And that's why, you've seen them move up like they have in polls and jump into the top 25 when this really was a team that I think a lot of people expected to be a bottom 4 finisher in the SEC. Not looking that way anymore.
Oh, absolutely. It's been an incredible SEC thus far. Vanderbilt looked relatively solid out there in the great state of South Carolina. It's going to be so interesting to see what we get out of these top teams, these bottom teams, these middle teams. Heck, Missouri, we're going to see what they're able to do against a real opponent as well after they knocked off Mississippi Valley State by 71 points about 2 or so weeks ago as well. And a man that he always puts us up 71 points. That'd be you, Blake. You do such an amazing job taking a look at this great game of college basketball. So all the good people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, I always appreciate it, Greg. Yeah, you can find us Southeastern 16 on YouTube. Pretty much daily live shows we're doing now during SEC basketball season in the mornings and sometimes at nights. You can find us there. And everything else college basketball related, you can follow me on Twitter at the Blake Lovell.
Absolutely. And Blake, he does such a great job looking at this amazing game of college basketball. Every single time he joins me, lends such great insights, and did so once again today. So big thanks to Blake for joining me on Cuts Soups, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. And coming up next, it is that time of the podcast to give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Tuesday as we hit some bank shots. All right, guys, it's getting into crunch time with regards to our holiday shopping because Thanksgiving is come and gone. We're through Black Friday. We're in the month of December, and you need to get that unique gift for someone that you truly care about. Uncommon Goods, that is a perfect place to go because they've got something for everyone, whether that be an experience or a gift that you just can't find anywhere else. Like, I've been in a lot of circumstances where I try to get something for my mom because when you're a guy and you're trying to shop for your mom, bomb. You have no idea what in the heck to do. Just being able to get something that's a little bit off the walls is what Uncommon Goods does a great job of. Their products are high quality, they're unique, and oftentimes handmade or made in the United States, and they have the most meaningful, out-of-the-ordinary gifts anywhere. They even have gifts that you can customize for those that are book lovers, diehard sports fans. They've got unique mugs, and if you're gifting for someone that doesn't want a thing, they want an experience, they want to be able to take part in something that is fun, they've got classes from everything from reading a lunar astrology chart, some unique cooking classics, mixology, and so much more. And you can get 15% off right now over at uncommongoods.com/coast. You go to uncommongoods.com/coast. You get 15% off of your order. That is over at uncommongoods.com/goods. Uncommon Goods, we're out of the ordinary. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Heaps with myself, Greg Heaps Peterson, now part of the Beast and Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by Blake Lovell, who does great work over at Southeastern 16. Take a look at this wonderful game of college basketball that we all know and love. Every single time he joins me, lends such great insights, and did so once again today. So big thanks to Blake for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Tuesday as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that as per usual, any changes that are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at GNN_D1, and we're going to be going in the Las Vegas rotation order. This is where we go with the games in bigger conferences first, and then the smaller conference games, the Patriot League, the MEAC, the SWAC, the Big South, the Atlantic Sun, the Southland. Hopefully I got all of them. Those are going to be the games at the bottom, Northeast Conference as well. So let's get things started with 601, 602 on the card. It is Cincinnati, and yes, Bill Belichick, we are on to Cincinnati. They're on to the road, and they're facing off against Villanova. Villanova is a 4-point home underdog with your total between 138.5 to 139. I said Cincinnati is a 5-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay it. Now, with Cincinnati, they have played one of the weakest schedules in all of college basketball, and I fully recognize that, but the way that they have been out there mauling and dominating, and the way that Villanova just continues to look shaky, just has me feeling a little bit tepid on this Villanova team as of right now. Eric Dixon's been great. 25 points, 6.5 boards, 3.5 assists. He's shooting north of 50% from three-point range, but you know that the 50% three-point shooting just not quite sustainable, and outside of Uga Poplar, Jamari Breakis, pair of guys give you between about 12 to 12.5 points per contest. You just don't really have a lot of support. And Yak Boyaki has been able to give you a little bit down low, but there's also a Villanova team that's turned the ball over a touch more than they have in the past. And for the Cincinnati team, I think that they should be able to absolutely maul on the boards. You've right now got 8.5 rebounds at 12 points per contest out of Dylan Mitchell. They've been without Dan Skillings throughout the entirety of the season, and even if he plays in this game, he's probably not going to be 100%. I've just ruled him out until further notice, but Aziz Bendengo, he's able to give you darn near 3 blocks per contest. Connor Hickman has been a nice fit for this team after coming in from Bradley. You haven't even gotten anything out of Day Thomas, who he's been dealing with injuries as well. Just came back into the fold for the team after he was a double-figure scorer for them last year as well. And Simeus Lukasius, just all sorts of versatility at 6'8", 16.5 points, 4 assists, shooting north of 50% from 3 again. Remember, that should be coming down for Cincinnati. They're shooting 41.5% from 3, and they do shoot 60% at the free throw line. That is a little bit of an issue if you're looking to lay this number, but even if the Cincinnati does find themselves in late game fouling situations, I think that their overall rebounding is good enough, and I think that their defense is going to be able to take it to a Villanova team that, in their defense, they've actually been much better offensively recently. They're a little bit of a slower tempo team, and Cincinnati typically known for defense, but I did say I told 141. Both of these teams have shot it really well from three-point range. I do think that late game fouls can help you out with this total as well. So I'm in on the over, and I'm willing to lay the 4 points with Cincinnati. 603, 604 on the betting board. It is Butler, and they play us Eastern Illinois. Eastern Illinois, 21.5 to a 22-point underdog, and total on this game going to be getting it between 138.5 to a 139. Did somebody total 142.5. I'm in on the over for Butler. They are coming off of a very nice win over Mississippi State last week, and it's been up and down for them. As for Butler, they were able to have that triumph, but we know that earlier in the year they lost to Austin Peay at home, but they do have their top 2 scorers back from a season ago that are pretty much putting up the same numbers as the season ago. Jamal Telford along with Pierre Brooks have been able to combine for about 32 points per contest. You've been able to have Telford shoot 46.5% for 3, Brooks 48.5% for 3, and as a whole, 42.5% three-point shooting for Butler, but 14 turnovers per game. This is an Eastern Illinois team that's currently outside the top 275 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and this is a bunch that, while they do give up a lot of open looks from three, they do a nice job of being able to wrestle the ball away. You've got RT Stapleton, main point guard, giving out 4 assists, a little bit over 2 steals per contest, has been dealing with a little bit of injury throughout the season, so you want to be checking his status. I think that there's a good chance that he goes in this one, but if not, that'll put a little bit more on the plate of Nikhil Shelton, and Shelton has been able to log about 18.5 points per contest, and I pretty much have it half in and half out for RT Stapleton. I've went somewhere in the middle because even if he does play, I don't think that he's going to be fully 100%, but Cooper Jacoby, he's able to give you 9.5 boards, 14 points. He's actually been able to give you a little bit of range, shooting 35% from three-point range. That's a 6'7" combo player. He missed half of last season, and you can tell that when he was out of the lineup, this was just a team that was not the same without him, but Zion Fruster, he has been able to step up over the last few games ever since we have seen Stapleton be out. He's been able to give you a little bit more facilitation coming off in the last game against Northern Illinois, being able to dole out 4 assists. So that's something that you do like to see. Eastern Illinois a little bit careless with the ball as well, 13 turnovers per game. Butler, I do think, is going to be able to find a bunch of nice open shots from three-point range, and we've been noticing this Eastern Illinois team being very pesky. They pushed Northwestern to overtime. They played a spirited game against DePaul, which it's all of a sudden looking like a little bit of better results. So I did set my number at an 18.5. I do think that this is a little bit out of whack, and Eastern Illinois has been playing some better basketball than expected. So I'm going to be in on the over, and I won't take this points with Eastern Illinois. 6-5, 6-6 on the betting board. It is Miami, and they play us at Arkansas. Arkansas finds themselves as 4-point road favorites on this game between 156.5 to 157, and I'm going to write this one up. A lot of people are going to call me crazy for this one, but so crazy it just might work. I am going to be in on the money line of Miami. I set them as 1.5-point favorite. Miami's number 4 in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis at home. Has it been a less than savory season for them? Yes. Have they really been struggling on defense? Oh, yes. Outside the top 275 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but you still have Nigel Pack on this team. From that Final Four team, he's able to log for you about 15 points per contest, doling out 4.5 assists per game, is dealing with injury. You do want to be noting that, but he's currently listed as questionable. I'd be surprised if he misses this game. Again, probably not going to be 100%, so you can't award the full amount of points that you normally would, but even if he does miss this game, so have Matthew Cleveland, who I think that he's better than what he's shown thus far this season. 8.5 points, 4.5 boards per contest thus far after last year. Gave the team more like 13.5 points per game, and then Jalen Blackman, a 20-point-per-game scorer from the Atlantic Sun last season. He's been able to shoot 39% from three-point range as Miami turned the ball over only about 9 times per contest. They shoot 81.5% at the free throw line, and I talk about that Nigel Pack injury, and for Arkansas, they've been dealing with a bunch of injuries as well. Jonas Adu has hardly been able to get out there on the floor. Trevon Brazile has been missing for a few games this season as well, so you've had a few guys be in and out of the fold. I like what I'm seeing out of Boogie Flan right now. He has been boogieing around with 16 points, 5 assists, shooting north of 40% from three-point range, but again, you've got an Arkansas team that they've really been able to load up their numbers based on the fact that they blew out Maryland Eastern Shore by 100 million points. You saw the rubber meet the road for them a few days ago when they played that game against Illinois, and they lost that one by double figures, and they got exposed defensively on that front as well. You've got Abdou Thiero, who's been amazing, 19.6 boards, nearly 3 steals per game as well, but again, with this Arkansas team, do have my question marks with DJ Wagner. He just has not been able to develop as a top 20 prospect. You've had John L. Davis go from being a 16-plus point per game scorer over at Florida Atlantic, just really not pan out in this program as well. And even though Nigel Pack is very questionable for Miami in this one, I'm going to be willing to ride with them. I'll ride on the money line. For the sake of the article, we'll be riding up to +4, but in on Miami in this spot. I did set my total 153.5. I do think that Arkansas is starting to give you a little bit more defensively, so it is a case where you're at a 156.5. I do think that this has gone a touch too far in on the under, and then riding up Miami. 607, 608 on the betting board. LaSalle is on the road against Northeastern. Northeastern, a 1.5-point favorite, and your total on this game is 144.5 with Northeastern. I did set them as a favorite of 2.5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay up to a deuce with them for LaSalle. Certainly has been a team that's done a solid job in the backcourt thus far. Even with all the losses that they've had, they've been able to do a nice job mixing and matching there. But for Northeastern, this has been a nice surprise. After last year, this was a less than savory year, and they've done much of their damage as far as the season without Masai Troman, who was deemed to be probably their top player, a double-figure score from a season ago. He's come back, and he's been able to do a pretty rock-solid job for the team. Additionally, for LaSalle, you've been able to get a lot going with the 19 points per game out of Corey McKeithen. He comes on over from Ryder, about 3.5 assists, 19 points per contest, but I think the big question for LaSalle is, what are you able to get depth-wise out of some of these guys that you were expecting to step up, like a Tunde Valberg Vasasi? He stands 6'8". Last year shot about 35.5% from three with over 6 points per contest. Seems to have regressed a little bit this season. 4 points or fewer now in 4 out of the team's last 5 games. I like what you're getting out of Jaleel White, 12.5 points on boards, coming on over from Temple. This team in LaSalle has only turned the ball over about 10.5 times per contest, and that's been the bane of the existence of Northeastern the last few seasons. Just a little bit too much sloppiness, but they've been able to really clean that up with 11.5 turnovers per game, and I do think they've got the best do-it-all sort of player in Harold Woods. 15 points, 8 boards, 2.5 assists, and then additionally you've been able to get about 16.5 points out of Rashad King, who has been a king in the backcourt. 6 boards, 4.5 assists, a lot of versatility for this unit. For LaSalle down low, Demetrius Lilly has been able to give you about 7.5 rebounds per game, and Northeastern doesn't have that guy like a Chris Doherty from 8 seasons ago that really is going to just pound you down low, but I like what I'm seeing out of Alexander Nawaga. He's been able to give you about 3.5 rebounds per game. He's got a little bit of size and was dealing with injury towards being part of the season, but he seems to be being able to fortify himself as well. So this is one of these games where I'm going to be willing to lay up to 2 with Northeastern. Do think that even though neither of these teams necessarily gun it, that they are going to be relatively efficient on the offensive side of things, but I do think that you've got a little bit of lofty three-point shooting with LaSalle. I think that they've been a tad bit fortunate there. I do think that things go downward as Northeastern really buckled down on defense with giving up 68 or fewer in each of their last 5 games. So I'm in on the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay up to a deuce with Northeastern. 6-9, 6-10 on the betting board. This will be another game that I write up as you've got Northern Kentucky on the road against Akron. Akron is a 6.5 point favorite. Totals between 144.5 to 145. I'm going to be writing up the under in this game as I set my total at a 140. For Northern Kentucky, they have broken the 64-point plateau against a D1 opponent just once, and for Akron, it's been less than savory for them this season on defense. They have been giving up north of 70 points on the regular. This is a team that is outside the top 200 terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but I do think that John Gross is going to get in these guys, and I do think that they're going to be able to buckle down a little bit more on that front. And then for Northern Kentucky, currently a unit that's shooting 28% from three-point range. I like Sam Vincent, 12 points, 5 boards, 3.5 assists, 2.5 steals per contest, but the team is about 280th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. They turn the ball over 13 times per game. They really have 2 guys that are able to give you rebounding. Trey Robinson, about 7.5 boards per contest. LJ Wells, he's been able to give you about 6 points, 5 rebounds per game, but it's not even like they've got a ton down low either. So I'm also going to be willing to lay with an Akron team that has James Okonkwo, who's been able to give you 8 rebounds per game, began his career over at West Virginia along with North Carolina. Would like to see a little bit more out of Isaiah Gray, but he seems to be bursting out right now, double figures in 4 of the last 5 games after he began his career over at Cornell. He's never been a great three-point shooter this year, shooting 63% from 3. That'll see a bit of regression. Overall, it's an Akron team that is shooting 37.5% from the outside. Don't know if they're going to quite be able to continue that all throughout the season, but Nate Johnson has really stepped up this year after he was a nice ancillary scorer seasons ago, 13.5 points, shooting 45.5% from three-point, so do have to like his game. And then you're getting additional rebounding out of Amani Lyles, who's been able to give you about 7 boards, 9 points per game. He's been a nice surprise, shooting north of 40% from three-point. The overall versatility of Akron should take it out of Northern Kentucky, but I do think that Northern Kentucky going to provide a speed bump, slow down this game, so I set my line at 8. I'm going to be willing to lay with Akron, and then for the write-up, I'm looking at the under. 6-11, 6-12 on the betting board. It is Missouri, and they play us at Cal, and the Cal Golden Bears find themselves as a 10-point dog. Total on this game between 150.5 to 151. Set my line at 7.5. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Cal. This is, by the way, the Conzo Martin Bowl, as Conzo Martin actually used to coach for both of these teams, but I like what I've been seeing out of this Cal team. They aren't necessarily a team that is going to be like the most cleanly team in terms of backcourt, and they've been dealing with a few injuries / I don't know what's happening with their entire backcourt, if they had a few suspensions, what have you, but we've seen guys like Javon Blackshear be out of the fold for the team for a bit, and Andrei Stojakovic, he's had to really step up, be the man in the backcourt, 17.5 points per contest, not really too much of a facilitator. That's what you've got guys like Blackshear and company to be able to do, but most of the backcourt has not played ever since that USC game, but Jeremiah Wilkerson, in their absence, he's really been able to be a guy that has been able to ascend, as in the 3 games that these guys have been missing ever since that USC game, 23, 16, and 25 points. Absolutely incredible, considering in the first 4 games of the season, he had a combined 11 points, so he has really been able to step up as a freshman. I like his game. And then you've got Lee Dort, who's able to give you 7.5 rebounds per game. Additionally, you've been able to get about 5.5 rebounds per game out of Matty Sissoko. And then on the flip side, it's a Missouri unit that's a bit better on the glass than they were 8 seasons ago, and they're the first 2 years under Dennis Gates. They were outside the top 275 in terms of rebound rate in both of those years, as you've been able to have Mark Mitchell be able to give you about 4.5 to 5 rebounds per game. Josh Gray, who comes over from South Carolina, he's able to give you 5+ rebounds per game. Now for Missouri, I do have a little bit of fear that they have just been pummeling really bad competition, and they might not be able to do so good in these step-up games. They lost to Memphis to begin the season, and ever since that, they've played the likes of Howard, Pacific, Arkansas Pine Bluff, Mississippi Valley State. They have really been able to skyrocket up their numbers. I do like the fact that you got Caleb Grill back, 13.5 points, shooting north of 55% from three-point range. Shamar Bates, 40% three-point shooter from a season ago, 12 points per contest. They've got a rock-solid backcourt that's not turning the ball over too much, but again, what are they going to be able to do when they play against better competition? And I have my question marks with regards to this Missouri team in terms of a step-up game against a Cal team that, albeit they're a little bit gutted in the backcourt, but I do think that they're going to be able to hold in there. So did set my line at 7.5. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Cal, and with regards to this total, I did set my total at a 153.5. You do have a Cal team that's been dealing with a few guys being out in the backcourt, but Cal has really been looking to push tempo on this Missouri team when they're firing all cylinders under Dennis Gates does the same. So I'm in on the over, and I'm going to be willing to take the points with Cal. 6-13, 6-14 on the betting board. It is Iowa playing us to Northwestern, and Northwestern does find themselves as a underdog of 5.5 points. The last game, it is 149, and I made my total 151.5 in on the over. This is a Iowa team that year in and year out, typically they average between 15 to 20 points more per 100 possessions at home rather than on the road. It's even bigger than that as of right now, but I do think that that'll iron out just a touch. But it's an Iowa team that they've been able to do an incredible job getting 75 plus in every one of their true home games thus far this season, with Owen Freeman actually leading the way in terms of scoring. He down low 17 points, 8.5 boards. He's been able to pop a few threes, and you've seen Peyton Sanford be a little bit cold from the outside, shooting just 28% from three-point range. Do you think that that'll be picking up a little bit? Still giving the team 15.5 points, 4 assists, 6 boards, so he's impacted the game in so many different ways. And Drew Thelwell, coming on over from Morehead State, being able to give out those 3.5 assists per game, that's big. And then you've got a Northwestern unit that it feels like they are a different team with Brooks Byronheiser out there. He's been back for 4 games. He's had a combined 80 points and 32 rebounds in those games, so that's big for a Northwestern team that last year was well outside the top 200 with regards to their rebound rate. But you can tell that they're missing that, shall we say, stabilizing force that Boo Buie always provided them in the backcourt. They're still not turning the ball over a ton. They're turning the ball over 10 times per game, but now they have to really lean on Nick Martinelli. He's got good 6'7" size. He's able to give you 20.5 points. He last year shot just 27% for 3. Right now shooting 60% from the outside. I do think that that's going to be drying up a little bit, but as his 3-point shooting dries up, Ty Berry, who last year shot 43.5% for distance, should be able to build off the 31% 3-point shooting he's had, but he just has not been good recently. A combined 8 points in the last 3 games, as he had his season ended by injury last season. I have to wonder if that's been sort of hurting him just a little bit. It's a Northwestern team that's still pretty solid at generating turnovers, but Iowa at home, they do a good job of protecting the ball. On the road, you've got your issues there, but that said, this is a game where I do think that Iowa is going to be able to get the job done at Carver Hawkeye Arena. I think that they get north of 75 points, as they always do at home, to be able to get the game sort of played in their manner. So I did set my total at a 151.5. I'm in on the over. And with Iowa, I'm willing to lay up to 7 with them. 6-15, 6-16 on the betting board. It is Princeton, and they're on the road against St. Joe's. St. Joe's hopes to not be average Joe's as 5.5 point favorites, and your total on this game, it is 149.5, and with St. Joe's, set them as just a 2.5 point favorite. So I'm going to be willing to take the 5.5. This is a Princeton unit that is oh so efficient on the offensive side of things. A top 30 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis last season. They do a nice job not turning the ball over. They play a nice, slow, and methodical pace. That said, they do leave a little bit of something to be desired on the defensive side of things. And for St. Joe's, we've seen the best of them this year, being able to take down Texas Tech, and we've seen the worst of them losing to Central Connecticut. So this is a team that it just feels like they're yo-yoing all around. And it's a very top-heavy team. You've got 3 guys giving you north of 13 points per contest. Rasheer Fleming, 13.5 points, 9 boards, a steal and a half per contest, shooting 38.5% from 3. And then a combined 31.5 points out of Eric Reynolds and Xavier Brown in the backcourt. These 2 guys combined for 8.5 assists, 3 steals. Neither are shooting above 32% from 3-point range. And then we got Derek Simpson shipping in their 3.5 assists, 8.5 points per game. Nobody else really gives you north of 6 points per contest nobody other than Fleming is giving you north of 4.5 rebounds per game. So a Princeton team that doesn't necessarily do the world's greatest job on the glass should be able to hold in there with Caden Pierce being able to give you 7 boards, 3.5 assists, 11.5 points. He's shooting 35% from three-point range. You've got Xavion Lee, who's just a really nice stat sheet stuffer in general. 15 points, 5 boards, 5 assists. Now for Princeton, they're not going to go too deep into their bench either, but they really don't need to because they're one of the best teams at not fouling in all of college basketball. They keep things very disciplined with the way that they don't play super duper up tempo. These guys are not gassed at the end of games as well. And additionally, you've been able to get some good production out of Blake Peters, who's giving you a darn near 10 points per contest. He's a career about 35.5% three-point shooter that's shooting more like 40% thus far this season. And do you think that Princeton going to remain lively against the St. Joe's team that they're a little bit more of, in my opinion, a mid-tempo team? St. Joe's should have a little bit of an advantage on the glass, and to the credit of St. Joe's, they've been able to buckle down a little bit more with their defense, giving up fewer than 70 in 3 of their last 4 games. So this is a game that I'm going to be in on the under on. I said my total 146.5, but I can only make St. Joe's a 2.5 point favorite, so we'll take those points with Princeton. 6-17, 6-18 on the betting board. It is Hampton, and they play us in North Carolina A&T. And A&T does find themselves as 5.5 to 6 point underdogs. So on this game between 150.5 to 151, and set my line at 2. I'm going to be willing to take the points with A&T. A&T has some really nice top-flight scorers, and they do a tremendous job of taking care of the ball. A&T last year was a top 25 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per-possession basis, and they've got a guy in Camden Shell who's been able to give you about 4 to 4.5 assists per game, and has done a great job of getting it to Ryan Forrest, who has become that top scorer for the team. 21 points per contest. Last year was Landon Glassberg who was that top scorer, and he's still been rock solid, giving you 17.5 points per game, but he's grown his game a little bit more. Now he's giving you 2 steals, 3 assists, 4 boards per contest, so that's been nice to see after this team was well outside the top 250 in terms of rebound rate 8 seasons ago. Nicolas Chidakadis, he's been able to give you about 7 boards, 8 points per game, comes over from the country of Greece. He's been rock solid there. Team is currently dealing with Will Felton dealing with an injury. He's been able to give the team about 5.5 rebounds per game when he's been out there, but he went out in that Buffalo game, was not seen in that Eastern Carolina game, so I think that he's going to be out once again. But Jonathan Lamotte, hopefully I said that correctly, he has been really able to stuff the stat sheet for this team. 13 points, 38% three-point shooter at about 6'4", 4.5 boards, 4 assists. That has been tremendous to see. And Hampton has a nice go-to scorer. That'd be Noah Farrakhan. He, over at Eastern Michigan, a few seasons ago when they had Amani Bates on the roster, was that number 2 scorer that was averaging 16 points per game. Well, he's back to averaging 16 points per game. For a Hampton team that's taking good care of the ball, they're only turning the ball over 10.5 times per game. They're forcing some steals. Down low, they should have the best rebounder in this game in Kyrie Smolin. But it's about the ancillary pieces. You've got someone who comes over from Howard and Wayne Bristol Jr., never really panned out over at Georgetown. Many years ago over at Howard, he was a double-figure scorer. Hasn't really given you too much. 6.5 points, 4.5 boards. It's a team that has collected. They shoot 32.5% from three-point range. George Beal has been able to give you double figures, but Xavier Long, the transfer from the Metro Atlantic Conference, he's only been able to give you about 5 points per game. You've got some question marks in terms of the overall facilitation for this team, as Farrakhan has been that main guy, and I do think that that's going to allow this A&T team to remain very lively with a guy in Shell who's able to do a nice job being able to dole out the ball. So I'm going to be willing to take those points with North Carolina A&T. I did set my total at 150. Both of these teams play relatively fast, but even though both of these teams really don't turn the ball over a ton, they don't really hit a lot of shots. So I'm in on the under, and I'm going to be willing to take those points with A&T. 6-18, 620 on the betting board. It is Syracuse on the road against Tennessee. Tennessee is a 18.5 to a 19.5 point favorite. Total on this game between 145 to 145.5. Set my line at 18.5. Now that we're getting to a 19 plus, I'm going to be willing to take those points. Tennessee has been very impressive, and Tennessee has been able to dominate teams. Feels like if you look at the shot quality numbers, they've been a little bit of a fortunate team thus far this season, and they're going to maul teams into oblivion. You've got a guy in Zakai Ziegler who's been one of the best facilitators in all of college basketball thus far this season, so there's no question that they are far advanced from the Syracuse team, but I do think that Syracuse is going to be able to get a little bit more out of Charlie Bello. Last year, shot north of 40% from 3, gave the team 12 plus points per contest. He's really struggled with his shot thus far. Additionally, for Syracuse, I do think that you're going to have this team be able to be relatively okay down low. Donnie Freeman give you 9 rebounds per game. Eddie Lampkin still is able to do a nice job of being able to give you some boards, 10.5 points, 7.5 boards. He's been a really nice passer as well with about 3 assists per game. Now they need a little bit more of a true facilitator. Yaquan Carlos has been able to give out about 3 assists per contest, but feels like he hasn't necessarily been the world's greatest fit for the offense quite yet. J.J. Starlin, he's been that main man with about 20 points per game, but it is a Syracuse team that's shooting just 27% from three, albeit they're protecting the ball. They're only turning the ball over 10 times per game. Now, last year, they were tremendous at generating steals. They have not done that thus far this season, so a Tennessee offense that hasn't been under a ton of duress, they should be able to take care of the ball. They're shooting his collective 38% from three-point range, which I think might go into a little bit of regression, but Chaz Lanier has been able to give the team double figures. Hasn't quite been the same dynamo that he was at North Florida, but going from North Florida up to Tennessee, he's been able to make that jump really well, but I do think that we've just gone a touch too far. I do think that we should see some Tennessee domination, but going to set my line at 18.5, so I'm going to be willing to take the 19 plus here with Syracuse. And with regards to the total, I did set my total at a 148.5. Fully recognize that Tennessee is known typically for their defense, but their offense has really looked much better this year as well. So I'm in on the over, and I'm going to be willing to take the 19 plus here with Syracuse. 621, 622 on the betting board. Another game that I'll write up, and I've got to get online with these write-ups, by the way. We've got South Carolina on the road against Boston College. Boston College 3 to 3.5 point home underdog. Sun on this game, it is 137 after 138, and wrote up Boston College. I like them outright on the money line. I set Boston College as a favorite of 4 points personally. With South Carolina, there's just really nothing that is impressing me about this team. For South Carolina, they are outside the top 100 with regards to their rebound rate. They haven't necessarily been able to do the most sharp job on the defensive side of things. Offensively, they just have not been able to get a lot going with regards to their guard play as well. And for Boston College, very much a less than savory loss a few days ago against Dartmouth, but I mean, that shouldn't completely undo the good that they were able to do in that Cayman Islands Classic where they were able to win that tournament. I like Donald Hand Jr., what he's been able to provide. 14 points, 8 boards as a 6'5", do-it-all sort of player that's shooting 37% from three. Now, Colin Murray Boyles on the flip side for South Carolina. He's stretching out his range to be able to pop a few threes. He's giving you 15 points, 8.5 boards, a block, a steal per contest, so he's been able to do a solid job there, but you can tell that without Michi Johnson from a season ago, they've just really struggled in terms of the backcourt. Jamari Thomas, the Norfolk State transfer, has been able to give you 12 points, 2.5 assists per game. Last year shot 38.5% from three. This year more like 34.5% from the outside. Jacoby, a.k.a. Scooby Wright, has been able to give you 11 points, 3 assists. So, I mean, those guys have been able to do a solid job. But Nick Pringle comes over from Alabama. Only about 8 points per contest. He's been okay down low, but the team as a collective shooting just 32% from three-point range. Just feel a little bit rudderless in terms of their offense. I think that that's the best way of putting it in. For Boston College, Chaz Kelly has been able to give the team some nice facilitation and assist-to-turnover ratio that hovers right around 3. I'd like to see a little bit more rebounding out of Chad Venning, who's only been able to give you about 4 boards per contest, but Elijah Strong, he's lived up to his name down low. He's been able to give the team right around about 5 boards, 11.5 points, shooting in the mid-30s from three-point range. Boston College does turn the ball over about 12 times per game, so a little bit of concern there, and I want to see a bit more out of Deion Brown, who comes over from UMBC, where last year he was averaging 19 points per game. Knew that that would take a little bit of a fall off, but he's outscored 5 points or fewer in each of the team's last 3 games, but it's also given out a few assists as well. Just feels like Boston College has things going quite a bit better in the backcourt. I do think that they get the job done against the South Carolina team that's been, shall we say, a little bit underwhelming this year. I did set my total at 138. Do you think that this is a nip and tuck game that involves some late game fouling? 137.5 or less is the max I'm willing to take over, but I'm willing to take it over, and I do like Boston College. I'll write on the money line, and I'll be writing that one up. 623, 624 on the betting board. Duquesne plays us to St. Peter's. St. Peter's is a 4 to 4.5 point underdog. Tonight's game is 126 or 126.5, and for St. Peter's, I did set them as a 1-point favorite. I do like them. I'll write on the money line. This is a Duquesne team that is just not the same as they were for him a season ago, and I do recognize that going on the road is going to be difficult in this sort of ordeal, but I do think that for St. Peter's, they are built for it. This is always one of the better defenses that you're going to find in all of college basketball. They sped themselves up a little bit this season as well, but when you hold UMBC on the road to just 61 points, you know how rock solid this defense is, and they played against some of the faster teams in all of college basketball. Fairleigh Dickinson, UMass Lowell, UMBC. Those are 3 teams that just absolutely gun it, and this team has still been able to do a rock-solid job down low with Stephon Roberts being able to supply 9 rebounds per game. They've been dealing with an injury to Mohamed So. He's been out since that Rutgers game, and he last year was one of the team's better returning players, averaging about 5.5 points, 5 boards from a season ago, so they're going to look to get him out there on the floor sooner rather than later, but their three-point shooting is actually about 40%. I think that this is going to be going downward. You've had a pair of guys in Armani Ziegler who have been able to give you about 13 points per contest, 15 points per game out of Marcus Randolph, combining to shoot north of 40% from three-point. 15 turnovers per game is quite a concern for the St. Peter's bunch, but it's not like this is a Duquesne team that's out there being a heat-seeking missile in terms of generating turnovers themselves, and they're turning the ball over 13 times per game, and they're only shooting about 29% from the outside. Trey Dinkins, he comes in from the Metro Atlantic. He, along with Jake DiMichele, have been able to combine for about 22 points per contest. You don't have a single guy other than Halil Berry, who's only played in 3 games thus far this season. That's supplying north of 5 rebounds per game, and for Berry, he's been able to give you 6.5 rebounds per game, but it's a very small sample size, so we need to see a little bit more there. Jayshawn Corbett, who comes in from Chicago State, 6'6", good rebounder over at Chicago State last season, so only giving the team 7.5 points, 4.5 boards this season, so he's had a little bit of a tough time stepping up to a higher level. I do think that with this Duquesne team, it's a little bit of a strange blend as of right now. They're going through a coaching change with Keith Zambrot retiring in the offseason, and they've been close in a lot of these games. They just haven't necessarily pulled them out. I do think that St. Peter's going to be able to lock down with regards to their defense. Do think that the 126 is a little bit too low. St. Peter's has been quite a bit better with their offense this season, and Duquesne, not necessarily the world's greatest team at generating turnovers. So my total 129, I like the over, and I do like St. Peter's outright on the money line. 625, 626 on the betting board. Western Michigan is on the road facing off against Dayton, and Dayton does find themselves as 24 to 24.5 point favorites in your total on this game. It is 146.5, and with Dayton, I did set them as 20.5 point favorites. I feel like we've gone a little bit too lofty here. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Western Michigan. I actually like the versatility that you've got with this Western Michigan unit, as Owen Lobsinger is 6'8" last year, was a mid-30s shooter from three-point range, so do think that he's going to be able to offer some good value along the perimeter against a Dayton team that, once again, they've been able to do a pretty rock-solid job with regards to their play on the outside. They don't have the guys like they had from a season ago, like Kobe Bryant and company, that were just absolute dynamos from three-point range, but Enoch Cheeks, Nate Santos, they're combined shoot about 41% from three-point range. These two guys combined for 28 points per game. Cheeks is give you 7.5 boards, 2.3 steals per game. He just does it all for this team. Javon Bennett has been a nice steadying force with a steal and a half, 2.5 assists per contest, so I do like that. And then Zedke, need to see a little bit more from him in terms of a rebounding perspective, but 1.3 blocks, 4.5 rebounds per game, that's been solid. The big issue is Pasha Alexander. It just feels like isn't the world's greatest fit with this offense, 4 assists per game, but he hasn't really been able to give a lot on the scoring front, while Malachi Smith continues to be that main ball handler with about 5 assists per game, but you're able to throw at a team multiple different looks. And on the flip side, for Western Michigan, Javon Hanna has been able to give you 12 points. He's shooting 39% from three-point range. And Markai Strickland has missed a few games this season, but has come back for Western Michigan. He's been able to give you 12.5 points per contest. For a Western Michigan team that's taking care of the ball, they're only turning the ball over about 10 times per contest, much like Dayton. I do think that they're going to be able to do a pretty solid job down low. They're getting about 6 boards per contest out of 6'10" Max Burton, who's been able to rise up. So I do think that this number has gone just a little bit too far. And for Dayton, still not a super up-tempo team. Neither is Western Michigan. I think that this is going to be a lower possession game, so I did set my total at 138.5. I like the under, and I'm going to take those points with Western Michigan. 627, 628 on the betting board. It is Georgia, and they're playing us in Notre Dame. Old Notre Dame is a 9 to 9.5 point underdog to this game between 141.5 to a 143. We know that Marcus Burton is going to be out for Notre Dame, and with that factored in, and I set Georgia as an 8.5 point favorite. This actually opened up as an 8. Now that we've shifted north of 9, I'm going to be willing to take those points with Notre Dame. For Notre Dame, even with Burton out, we saw that in their first game against Houston. They made things grimy, gross, slow, and I think that they're going to be looking to do a lot of that moving forward. I did set my total at a 144.5, so at the 142, I'm willing to go over, and the big reason why is that even though I do think that things are going to be gross, grimy, slow, what have you, this is a Georgia team that does have a lot of good offensive weapons. Asa Newell has been one of the best freshmen in all of college basketball, 15.5 points, steal and a half, block and a half, 6 rebounds per game. It's a Georgia team that as a whole, they're looking at push tempo. They're shooting 35.5% from three-point now. They need to get in control of the ball a little bit better. About 15 turnovers per game, but got Dakota LeFew along with Tyron Lawrence, who are combined for 25 points on 40% three-point shooting, both giving you 3 assists per game apiece. You should have this team be able to win the battle down low with Newell giving you all that he's giving you, but you've also got Ronald Godfrey. Godfrey comes over from Clemson. He's been able to give you about 6 boards per contest. to be able to help out along the post, and I do think that that's going to be big for Georgia in this one, but Notre Dame has enough three-point shooting, in my opinion, to be able to hang in there. Brendan Shrewsbury has been able to, since the beginning part of last season, shoot north of 37% from three. He's able to give you double figures. This team is going to need to find a little bit more of a setting force because Burton was that main facilitator, but Kiba Njai, he's able to give you about 6 boards per contest down low to be able to hang with Godfrey and company. Matt Oloko, he's able to go Oloko and comes in from Princeton, and he's a little bit of a do-it-all player. Over at Princeton last year, 3.5 assists, 12.5 points, shot 42% from three-point range. I think that his role is going to be very much increased in terms of handling the ball with Burton being out of the fold, and then throwing there Tay Davis, his 36% three-point shooting in. Do you think that Notre Dame is going to be able to hold in there? Do you think that Notre Dame is going to be slowing down their tempo moving forward? But I think that there's going to be a lot of efficient shot making in this game to be able to push the total over, and Notre Dame's going to be able to hold in there. So at a 9 or more, going to be one thing to those points with Notre Dame, and I'm in on this total over as well. 629, 630 on the betting board. UNC Wilmington is on the road facing off against East Carolina. East Carolina 5 to 5.5 point favorite, and your total on this game it is 140. And with East Carolina, set them as a 4.5 point favorite. So you're 5+. I'm going to be one thing the points with UNC Wilmington. Wilmington has been a sort of up and down team this season. Their defense has really been regressing over the last few seasons, but they've been one of the more, shall we say, efficient offensive teams in the country. As for UNC Wilmington, they've got Donovan Newby, who began his career over at UW-Milwaukee, logging 17.5 points, shooting 35% from three for a team that they do a nice job taking care of the ball. They did last year as well. Last year, top 5 team in the country, turns the fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, and they're turning the ball over about 11 times thus far this season. They've been able to have Joshua Corbin, who comes over from Robert Morris, be able to stabilize the offense. 7.5 points, 2.5 assists, shoots in the mid-30s from three-point range. I believe that this is his 6th year of college basketball, by the way, but they don't necessarily have that star guy outside of Donovan Newby, but they've got outside of him a lot of other guys, like a Bo Montgomery, who's been able to give you about 7.5 points per game. They've been dealing with some injuries, as you've had Elijah Jamison, who comes on over from UW-Milwaukee as well. He's been dealing with a injury over the last few games. You've got Noah Ross, who's missed a game or two, but he's been able to give the team 10 points, 7.5 boards. Should be all good to go in this one as well. And then on the other end of things, for East Carolina, R.J. Felton has just been the star for this team. 21.5 points, north of 6 boards. From three-point range, he has been very efficient at 37.5%, shooting north of 90% at the free throw line. For a team that only turns the ball over about 10 times per game, East Carolina has become one of the more slow-tempo teams in all of college basketball. Very top-heavy team. Outside of your main 6 rotation guys, you really don't get much outside of them. But Cam Hayes, even though his scoring has not necessarily been as great as you would like it to be since coming on over from the ACC, he's been able to give the team 4 assists to less than a turnover per game thus far this season. CJ Walker down low is able to give you 7.5 rebounds per game, but East Carolina doesn't have necessarily a ton of size. Harlow Biana, the 7-foot transfer from Niagara, I think is going to be able to lend Wilmington a little bit more down low, and that should be able to keep them lively in this game. I did set my total at 142.5. I think that this is going to be close enough for late game felling, and East Carolina is playing very slowly. They've been quite efficient with their offense, and Wilmington efficient with their offense, inefficient with their defense. So I'm in on the over and the points with UNC Wilmington. 631, 632 on the betting board. James Madison plays us to East Tennessee State. ETSU is an underdog of 2 points, and your total on this game, it is 142 to 142.5. Seeing straight 141 out there as well. And I set James Madison as an 8.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number with James Madison. I do think that they're going to be able to shoot it better from three-point range than they did in their last game against George Mason, where they dominated the boards, they won the turnover battle, but they just could not shoot from three-point range to save their lives, and sometimes that's just going to happen to you, and I do think that they right the ship here. As for this James Madison team, they're under the tutelage of Preston Spradlin, who comes on over from Morehead State, and his top scorer 2 seasons ago over there was Mark Freeman, who has done a nice job facilitating this offense. 12 points, 4 assists, shooting in the mid-30s from three-point range. He was able to get good production out of Bryce Lindsey as well. With Septon, he's been able to give the team 15 points per contest, and for James Madison as a whole, they're shooting about 35.5% from three-point range. Xavier Brown has been able to give you multiple steals, 14.5 points. He's the main holdover from last year's team, and A.J. Smith along with Elijah Hutchins Everett. They don't necessarily have amazing size. Hutchins Everett right around about 6'9", but they combine for about 14 rebounds per game, and they're going to be key in this game because ETSU's hallmark over the last few seasons has been doing a good job on the glass, but they're a significantly improved three-point shooting team from 8 seasons ago. Last year, they were outside the top 300 in terms of three-point shooting percentage, and now they're shooting 36.5% with Kamari Peterson, great name, being able to headline things. He's been able to give the team north of 15 points per contest. Nice stabilizing force in terms of being able to give out some assists as well. And then down low, you saw Jaden Seymour has now been able to stretch out his range, and he's shooting north of 40% from three-point range. Do expect that to fall off a little bit, but still has been able to give the team what you're accustomed to getting from him, about 16.5 points, 7 boards with that 42% three-point shooting. Peterson about 44.9% from the outside, with also the boogeyman, John Buggs III, who has been a nice three-point shooter over at places like UT San Antonio, North Texas. He's given the team 11 points, 40% three-point shooting, but a little bit of a top-heavy team as well. They've got plenty of size with Davion Bradford coming in as a 7-footer, began his career at Wake Forest and Kansas State, being able to supply about 4 or so rebounds per game. So do like what I'm seeing there, but James Madison, I think, is going to be able to do a good enough job down low and then let their backcourt be able to take over and be able to find a way to get the job done. So I'm going to be willing to lay with James Madison, set them as an 8.5 point favorite. I did set my total at 144.5. We've got a far advanced ETSU team in terms of their offense, and even though throughout his career, Preston Spradlin has typically played a little bit more of a slower tempo game, with Xavier Brown returning from James Madison, it's allowed him to be able to play a bit more quickly. So in on the over, and I'm going to be willing to lay the small number here with JMU, 633, 634 on the betting board. Indiana plays host to Sam Houston State. Sam Houston State, a underdog of 13.5 points in your total on this game, between 154.5 to a 155, and with Indiana, I did set them as a favorite of 15.5 points. So going to be willing to lay the 13.5 for Sam Houston State. They've been really cranking up their tempo this season, but I fear that they might be playing a little bit too fast for their own good, and know that this was not necessarily the most savory of road trips for Indiana last week, but they were able to get that win over Providence. I do think that they're going to be able to right the ship, and they've got some of the most talent of any team in the Big Ten, as you've got so much size down low, with Umar Bello being able to average darn near a double-double, 13 points, 2.5 blocks, 8.5 rebounds per game. Malik Renew continues to be able to give you some versatility with his 14 points, 5.5 boards. Mackenzie Mbakbo has been shooting north of 50% from three-point range, but again, with Indiana, do need to dial down the turnovers. They've been turning the ball over about 14 times per game, and Sam Houston State is a solid team at being able to generate turnovers in their own right. You got Lamar Wilkerson, who's a headline scorer with 19.5 points, shooting 45.5% from three, and as a whole, Sam Houston is shooting north of 40% from the outside. Keon Scroggins down low is able to give you about 5 boards per contest, and you get about 8 points, 5 boards out of Khalifa Sacco. Hopefully I said that correctly. He comes over from France. He's been rock solid, with Dorian Finster also being able to do a nice job, giving you some rebounding, giving you double figures as well, but this is also a Sam Houston State team that they've got their, shall we say, issues on the defensive side of things as well. You do allow for a lot of open shots as they do gamble a little bit for turnovers. As a result, they're allowing opponents to shoot 36.8% from three-point range. Not that Indiana is not without its warts as well, but at home they've been allowing opponents to shoot just 27% from the outside. Do think that with Indiana bringing in Miles Rice, they should be able to dial down their turnovers. And Trey Galloway, say what you want about his three-point shooting percentage being all over the place last 4 seasons. He's went from shooting 21.5% to 46.5% to 26% to now 55%. He's been able to do a nice job giving out 4.5 assists to less than 2 turnovers per game, and I do think that Indiana going to be able to get back on track here. I'm willing to lay up to 15 with Indiana. With regards to the total, set mine at a 151.5. You've got an Indiana team that has been pretty solid on offense, but again, they're not really looking to run it and gun it. I do think that Sam Houston, with their north of 40% three-point shooting, that sees a bit of a fall off here. So in on the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay up with Indiana. 635, 636 on the betting board. Murray State is going to be playing us to Evansville, and Evansville a 13 to a 13.5 point favorite. Totals between 143.5 to a 144.5, and with Murray State, I did set them as a favorite of 13 points, so I'm going to be willing to take the 13.5 or more here with Evansville. Evansville has had a little bit of a less than savory start to the season, but I do think that things are going to get righted for them. I do like the fact that they bring in the Eastern Kentucky transfer in Tyshawn Comer, who last year was averaging about 3 assists per contest. He should be able to do a nice job stabilizing this backcourt, a backcourt that has a few guys who are able to put it in there from three-point range. Gabriel Pizzato has been able to log 15.5 points per game. It's an Evansville team that right now as a whole, they're shooting only about 31% from three-point range. Pizzato more around about 33% from the outside, but Cameron Hafner, he's been able to give you about 15.5 points per game. It's an Evansville team that they don't get completely out of sorts with it, about 12.5 turnovers per game, and pretty rock solid down low. You've been able to have Joshua Hughes give you 5 rebounds per game. Tanner Cuff has been able to give you about 6 boards as well, and for Murray State, they don't have a ton down low. Kyron Lindsey, he comes on over from Georgia, and he's been able to give the team 6.5 boards, but really outside of that, you don't necessarily have that guy that down low is really going to instill fear in you, as Nick Ellington last year gave the team about 6.5 boards at a block per contest. seen a little bit of regression this year. Do think that Murray State is not going to be able to maintain their 40.5% three-point shooting as well, and I like a lot of these guys. You've got Kyron Milton, who comes over from Arkansas Pine Bluff. He's logging double figures. Terrence Harcum, he's been able to shoot 41.5% for three with 13.5 points per game after the last 2 years. Shot more in that neighborhood, about 35-36% from three-point range. And then A.J. Ferguson is someone that at 6'7" offers good stretchability. Last year over at Southern Illinois, shot about 30% from three. Right now, he is shooting north of 40% from three-point range. So do think that we're going to see a little bit of a downtick there for Murray State. They're the better team in this one. They've got some nice guys that are able to stretch the floor, and Jacoby Wood has been able to give you 6 assists per game, but he's also giving out north of 3 turnovers per contest. Do think that Evansville keeps things a little bit cleaner. Murray State overall the better team, but we have seen this Evansville team be able to come up with their offense ever since that really ugly 30 spot that we saw against Ohio State. And for Murray State, they themselves have been able to do a relatively good job being able to guard as well. So this is a game where I set my total at 143 here at 144 plus, in on the under end, and north of 13, going to be willing to take those points with Evansville. 637, 638 on the betting board. Southern Illinois plays Ulster Bradley. The Braves of Bradley are 3 to 4 point road favorites. It's all in this game between 146 and 146.5. So Bradley is a 3-point favorite. So now that we've gotten north of 3, I'm going to be willing to take those points with Southern Illinois. Southern Illinois really cranking up their tempo. Last year, they were a bottom 30 team in terms of total possessions per game. Now they're in the top 100 as they have Scott Nagy take over as their coach, and even though the team is 3-5, you can tell that this team is pretty close in their games, playing to overtime against Louisiana Tech. No shame there. You've got a guy in Kennard Davis who's done a nice job headlining the offense. 3 assists, 4.5 boards, 15 points per game on a mid-30s three-point shooting percentage. Now for Bradley, it's a team that's top to bottom, not necessarily amazing in one thing, but they're not really bad in one thing either. So they're a pretty complete team with Duke Dean doing a nice job headlining things as the main point guard. 5 assists, 14.5 points per contest, shooting 40% from 3, and there is one thing Bradley's doing a really good job of, shooting 43.3% from three-point range. This is largely a lot of the same core from 8 seasons ago that shot 37.5% from 3. Obviously, Connor Hickman along with Malevi Leon's gone from a season ago, but you bring back a guy that I really like from a season ago. Darius Hannah has been able to give you 13.5 points, 6.5 boards, but last year he really didn't pop threes, and now he's shooting north of 50% from three-point range. I do think that that's going to be starting to hit the skids just a little bit for the team. They do turn the ball over about 12.5 times per game, had a few turnover woes 8 seasons ago. Zeke Montgomery is back after he spent a year over at Rhode Island, 13 points, 2.5 assists. I've been liking what I've been seeing out of him, and this team isn't necessarily amazing down low, but you've got some like an Atlason down low who's able to give you about 4 or so rebounds per game. Ahmed Janovic, he's a 7-footer that comes in from Serbia. He's been able to give the team 5 boards, able to be a nice presence down low for this bunch, but I do think that in the end, Southern Illinois going to be able to hold in there. They don't necessarily have quite as much size as someone like Janovic, but you've got Jared Hensley, who at 6'8", he was a very good 3-point shooter. Season ago, he's been struggling a little bit more with the shot this season, but 10 points per contest. Ali Abdu-Diba, along with Elijah Elliott, and they combined for 29 points per contest. It's a relatively deep team that also has a guy that's giving you 5.5 points, 5.5 boards, and Rollins Alajibi, who as a freshman has really stepped up in a big way over the last few games. So do think that Southern Illinois going to be able to hang in there with Alajibi doing a much better job down low. So I'm going to be willing to take anything north of 3 with Southern Illinois. I did set my total at 149 with their tempo change being quite stark. So looking at the over and willing to take the points with Southern Illinois. 639, 640 on the betting board. Loyola Chicago is going to be playing against Eastern Michigan, and Eastern Michigan is a underdog of 18.5 points. So this game is 141 to 141.5, and with Eastern Michigan, I did set them as a 16.5 point underdog. So we'll take 18 plus with Eastern Michigan. I think the 2 DePaul transfers are going to be able to keep them lively in this game, as you've got Deshaun Nelson, who's a little bit more of a combo player that he needed a few games to be able to get going, but he's been able to give the team double figures on the regular over the last 5 or so games. And Jalen Terry, he has been really the scoring leader for the team all season long, being able to supply 15 points per contest. At 6 feet tall last season, shot 45% from three-point range over at DePaul. This year shooting 39% from the outside, throws in their 6 boards, 3.5 assists, which has been good, but you've also got Jalen Billingsley, who's able to give you 5+ boards per contest, and Christian Henry has been able to do a nice job helping on the backcourt as well. 14 points, 39% three-point shooting. He has been a nice surprise as a non-D1 transfer that's come in and been able to give this team some good production. And for Loyola Chicago, this is a team that does a really good job with their interior defense. Guarding the three-point line has been a little bit of an adventure for them over the last few seasons, and while they do an amazing job of not allowing opponents to get second chances, they don't necessarily generate a lot of them as well. You do have a trio of guys in Francis Nowak Forke, Miles Rubin, along with Kamani Hansu. Hopefully I said that correctly. All the three of these guys giving you between 5.3 and 6 rebounds per contest. You've been able to get about 14.5 points per game as well out of Jaden Dawson. For Dawson, he's shooting 40% from three-point range, but last year's top scorer, Desmond Watson, he's only been able to give the team 10 points per game. He's been able to give you some good facilitation, and this team really does a nice job of rebounding by committee. 5 separate guys, they give you at least 4 boards per contest, but it is a unit in Loyola Chicago that, while they shoot it relatively well from three-point range, they give up those threes as well. They don't necessarily play super-duper up-tempo, but I do think that for Eastern Michigan, what they've got along the perimeter is going to allow them to remain lively against the Loyola Chicago team that has struggled against some lesser teams. They played a single-digit game against Southern Utah. They got pushed by Chicago State for a little bit. So I do think that Eastern Michigan going to hold in there. Offense has been able to come a little bit more to life for them. So I'm going to take the points with Eastern Michigan. I did set my total at 142.5. Do have an Eastern Michigan team that's not necessarily looking to push tempo as well. Loyola Chicago, they do a solid job down low, but I think that this is just a hair too low. So here are the 141.5 in on the over as well. 641, 642 on the betting board. BYU, it's a road face-off against Providence, and Providence does find themselves as 5.5 point underdogs, seeing a 6 out there as well. The last game between 142.5 to a 143. We were thinking that Bryce Hopkins was going to be returning for the battle for Atlantis. That did not turn out to be the case. Could return in this one, but even if he does return, what are you going to be able to get out of him? But this is also a big-time travel spot for BYU. You have to go up from the state of Utah. You have to travel all the way out to Providence, Rhode Island. I set my line at 4, so I'm going to be willing to take the points. Providence and the Dunk, they've got one of the better home court advantages in all of college basketball. Now for Providence, the defense has been pretty rock solid. They've been a top 50 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, while the offense has been a disaster. Right now they're shooting 33% from 3. They're not turning the ball over a ton with 12 turnovers per game, but Jabari Abdul-Rahim is only giving you 6.5 points per game. You need more out of him. He did score 14 points in that last game against Indiana, but just has not been the same guy that logged 12.5 points per game when he was over at Georgia a season ago. Jaden Pierre has been really your main man, 13 points, 3 assists, shooting 45% from three-point range. Wesley Cardet has nice versatility, 5 boards, 10 points per game, but you really don't have that guy that strikes fear in you down low. Christ Adesonko along with Oswin or Asunwe. These guys are really hard to say with regards to their last names and pronunciation, but that said, they've been able to give you about 9.5 rebounds per game, so we will go with the 2 international men of mystery. Have been able to do a solid job down low for Providence, but for BYU, they should be able to win that battle down low with Kebakita being able to slope high 9.5 rebounds per game, and Fusani Traore has been able to give you about 8 boards per contest as well. It's a BYU team that overall shoots in the mid-30s from three-point range, so I think that that's going to be pretty sustainable moving forward. It's just a question of Kenyon Catchings. Is he going to be able to be a, shall we say, stable player, because he's had his amazing performances and then he's had his amazingly rough performances. Shot it really well in that Children's Invitational that we saw last week. He's overall been able to shoot about 33% from 3, though, because he was not shooting well prior to that. Igor Demine has been your main man, 14 points per contest, and I do love what you've been able to get out of Mihailo Boskovic, who he stands right around about 6'10". He's able to give you the versatility to be able to pop it from three-point range, about 5.5 points per game. I think that he's going to improve as the season goes along, but I do think that Providence defense is going to allow them to remain lively in this one, and I do think that it's going to cause this to be a low-scoring slog. I set my total at 140. I'm in on the under, and I do like the points with Providence. 643, 644 on the betting board. It is Arizona State, and they play us to San Diego. Old San Diego finds themselves as underdogs of 20 points, and Donon's game is anywhere between 148.5 to 149, and I said Arizona State as a 22.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay it. Been quite impressed by what I've seen out of Arizona State this far this season, as the three-point shooting has been much better than it has been in the past. Last year, they were well outside the top 275 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and it's a freshman that are really making such a big impact on this team. Jusan Senon, he's been able to give you 15.5 points per game from downtown. He's been able to shoot north of 50% from the outside. That should be drying up a little bit, but Jaden Keatance, he was the main guy that came in from the state of North Carolina. He's been the main low post guy. Give you north of 3 blocks, 8 boards, 7.5 points per game. Not really going to elevate you on the offensive side of things, but he's been a nice guy in the post. He's been great on the defensive side of things. And then Bashir Jihad, who comes over from the back, 13 points, 6 boards, shooting in the mid-30s from 3-point 3-point range at 6'9". Adam Miller has been taking much smarter shots this season as well for a team that's overall shooting about 38% from 3-point range. And the San Diego team just really doesn't impress me. They had to replace darn near everything other than Steven Jamerson from the season ago. Really hasn't taken a stride forward this year. 9 points, 6.5 boards. It's not bad down low, but you expected maybe a little bit more. Santiago Triat, he comes over from Argentina. He's been relatively solid. He's been able to take a nice stride forward. 9 points, 8.5 rebounds at a block per contest, but you don't have a ton for the San Diego team that's turned the ball over about 15.5 times per game. KJ Bradley, he's been able to give you 17 points, 4 assists, but he's also turned the ball over well north of 3 times per game as well. From the outside, you've got a San Diego team that's shooting 26% from 3-point range. They generate a few turnovers with Bradley, giving you north of 2.5 steals per game. You've been able to get a steal and a half, but only about 5 points per game out of Devin Delkey as well, but just not a lot of outside shooting. You've got a lot of guys coming up from the D2 ranks and the non-D1 level that are trying to be able to make an impact for the team, and right now, just not working for Steve Lavin's bunch. So, did set my line at 22.5. I'm going to be willing to lay with Arizona State, and I did set my total at 146.5. With San Diego, I just don't know if they're going to be able to do their part with this total. It's been a team that's been playing relatively slowly, and they have really only been able to break the 70-point plateau once over the last 3 weeks. That was against the Portland State team that's in the top 20 in terms of total possessions per game. So, I'm in on the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay with Arizona State. 645, 646. Another game that I'm going to be writing up as Wisconsin plays us in Michigan. Michigan is a 2.5 point underdog. Total on this game, 150.5. Wrote up Wisconsin. I set them as a 7.5 point favorite with this Wisconsin unit. They just do the little things better than Michigan. They're right now taking care of the ball, 10th in the nation in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. Michigan outside the top 320, and for Michigan, they do a nice job of being able to hit the glass. You've got Danny Wolf, who's been able to do a good job of logging nearly a double-double, 11 points, 10 boards, 3 assists. Nice stat sheet suffer, but again, for one, taking care of the ball. And two, Vladislav Golden, he's been able to give you 2 blocks. He's been able to give you about 5 rebounds per game. Just doesn't seem like the same guy that he was in the same system under Dusty May a season ago, though. You've been looking for really that main guy to be able to facilitate as Trey Donaldson and Rodney Gale. It feels like they're just sort of taking turns at this point, and they've been solid. A combined 25 points, 7 assists, but again, a combined 4 turnovers per game as well. Wolf by himself is north of 4 turnovers per game, and Will Shutter last year, he shot north of 50% from 3-point range. He's still been rock solid. He's been able to give you about 35.5% 3-point shooting. The versatility of he and Sam Walters are going to really test this Wisconsin team, but you've got a 7-footer in Stephen Krull that's able to go around the perimeter as well. He's been seeing a little bit of a reduced role this season, but has been a little bit of like an Ethan App 2.0. 8.5 points, 5.5 boards, 3.5 assists. Still able to give you a little bit of 3-point shooting, but John Tonji, 23 points, 5.5 boards on north of 40% 3-point shooting. He's been the headliner for a Wisconsin team that they don't turn the ball over. They're shooting 86.5% of the free throw line in a nip and tuck game. That could be massive in this one. Then John Blackwell, he's been that nice number 2 scorer, being able to give the team 15 points, does a nice job of just being able to keep things steady around the outside. You've got Max Kleesman, who's been able to come in, give the team 3 assists per game as well. It's a Wisconsin team that's very unselfish. They've got good stretchability like Michigan, and they're doing a better job of executing the little things. So I did write up Wisconsin for this one, and with regards to my total, I set mine at a 149.5. So here on 150 plus, in on the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay it with Wisconsin. 647, 648 on the betting board. It is Texas A&M playing us Wake Forest, and Wake Forest is an 8.5 to a 9-point underdog with your total between 141.5 to 142.5. And with Wake Forest, I did set them as an underdog of 9.5 points. So here at an 8.5, I'm going to be willing to lay it. We've seen quite a bit of line movement coming on this one as well, as Wake Forest opened up as an 11-point underdog. But for this Wake Forest team at an 11, I would have been willing to take it, but this has moved a little bit too far. Recognize the Texas A&M might be without a few key pieces in this game, but you've had Wade Taylor do a really nice job of supplying the team with 15-plus points per contest. He and Zarique Phelps have played really well with one another. As Phelps, he's not going to give you any sort of 3-point shooting whatsoever, and let's call it what it is. This is not a Texas A&M team that has ever really been that great of a 3-point shooting team. Last year, they were well outside the top 300 with regards to their 3-point shooting percentage. They're probably going to be a little bit better than that when it's all said and done, but their bread and butter is down low. You've got so many guys that they hit the glass. They were number 1 last season in terms of percentage of missed shots. That resulted in an offensive rebound. Anderson Garcia, Henry Coleman, these two guys both give you 6.9 very nice rebounds per game apiece. Solomon Washington is able to give you about 6 boards per contest, with he and Pharrell Payne both being able to give you a block per game. You just go down the list of guys that are giving you north of 3.5 rebounds per game. It's absolutely obscene, as I believe that they've got 7 different guys doing so, and they're only shooting about 30% from three-point range, but they do a nice job of being able to guard the three-point line. And I do think that for Wake Forest, we're going to see a bit of positivity with their three-point shooting, as right now they're shooting 26.5% from three-point range. Last year they shot north of 36% from three. Hunter Salle, after he shot darn near 40% from the outside last season, about 26.5% from three, 17 points, 3.5 assists per contest. And Cameron Hildreth, good versatility, 2 steals, 4 assists, 4 boards, 12 points per contest. So like what I'm seeing there, but Omaha Blue, he's been missing for quite a while for this team. You've got Efton Reed, who's giving you 6 boards per contest, and then David Crosby has been able to throw in their 7 points per game. They have a little bit more depth with Trayvon Spillers being able to give you 10 rebounds per game, but Spillers can't alone win the battle. Efton Reed just hasn't necessarily been too great for the team either. So I do think that with Texas A&M, they're going to be able to win from within. This was a number that at 11 I would have been willing to take it with Wake Forest, but we've just gone too far here. Willing to lay up to 9 points with Texas A&M. In terms of total, set mine at a 141.5. Do you think that Wake Forest continues to struggle on offense at Texas A&M, slows this game down, so in on the under and willing to lay it with A&M. 649, 650 on the betting board. It is Oklahoma playing us at Georgia Tech, and Georgia Tech a 10.5 to an 11-point underdog. So it's game between 150.5 to a 151.5. Set my line at a 146. So I'm going to be in on this total under with Oklahoma. They've been able to do a nice job of executing offensively. Not necessarily an up-tempo team. You never find that when it comes to Porter Mosher and his style, but I do think that for Oklahoma, they do a nice job getting the job done here against Georgia Tech, as I set my line at a 12. Right now at 10.5 to 11, it's a max I'm willing to lay, but I'm going to be willing to lay with Jalen Moore being able to give you more. 18 plus points, 6 plus rebounds from the outside. He's shooting 42% from three-point range for an Oklahoma team that as a whole, they're doing the little things well, shooting 37.5% from three-point range. Kobe Elvis is in the building along with Jeremiah Fears, both giving 4.6 assists per contest. Now for Fears, 4 turnovers per game. He's got to clean that up a little bit, but now they've got Bryson Gudine back as well. He missed 3 games earlier in the season, was a 40% three-point shooter over at Fairfield last season. Right now shooting about 40% from three-point range. And for Georgia Tech, this is just a team that I think needs to find their identity a little bit more, as they've actually got a former Oklahoma transfer in Javion McCollum, who's been able to give the team 13 points per game, but has missed the last 2 games due to injury. I don't necessarily think that that's the world's worst thing, because he and Nathan George are 2 guys that really need the ball in their hands to be successful. And George, he's a good facilitator, 6 assists per game. Not necessarily an amazing three-point shooter, but that's come along for the ride thus far this season at 36% from the outside. Georgia Tech really doesn't self-inflict a lot of wounds, only about 10.5 turnovers per game. And you've got down low a guy in Bate and Nongo who's able to give you 14 points, 8 boards at 6'8". He's got the versatility to be able to shoot threes. And then Dorian Niwa, he was able to come in as a freshman at 6'11". He's been able to give you about 6 rebounds per game as well. But Kawasi Reeves, I expected a little bit more from, about 9.5 points on less than 30% three-point shooting. Lance Terry, who missed all of last season due to injury, has actually been your top scorer with 14.5 points on 39% three-point shooting. I do think that Oklahoma with Sam Godwin being able to clean up the glass with about 7.5 to 8 rebounds per game, they take it to a Georgia Tech team that in their last 2 games they've gotten back online, being able to take down Charleston Southern and Central Arkansas, but when they've went up against better competition, they've had a really tough time with it. And this Oklahoma team proved out there in the battle for Atlantis that they're able to take down the good teams, and I think that they take it to Georgia Tech. So, and on the underside, my total 146, and want to lay up to 11.5 with Oklahoma at 651, 652 on the betting board. Ole Miss is on the road against Louisville, and Louisville does find themselves as 3 to 3.5 point favorites, and total on this game, you're going to be finding this at a 150, and I did set my total at 151. I'm going to be in on the over, and for Louisville, I set them as a 5-point favorite. For Louisville, they've been shooting about 30% from three-point range this season. That should be going northward, and it's an Ole Miss team that I really like. They are well coached under Chris Beard. Chris Beard always does a good job of being able to get the most out of his teams. They always have really good stretchability, with Jalen Murray doing so much for this team. An assist to turnover ratio that's hovering right around 5. He's been able to log 14.5 points per contest. Matthew Morrell, after a rough start to the season, he's now giving you 13 points per game. And Sean Badula, he's a do-it-all sort of guy. 13 points, 3 assists, 4 rebounds, just has been able to do a nice job of having this offense execute on all cylinders. They're only turning the ball over about 8 times per game while generating about 10 steals per game as well. But that said, this is a Louisville team that, even though they are going to be without Keyshawn Pryor for the rest of the season, that's an injury that is very much worth taking note of. And I think that they're still going to be able to do a pretty solid job down low. Pryor was their number 2 rebounder, and outside of Javon Hadley, you don't necessarily have a ton on the glass. 9.5 points, 7.5 boards out of Hadley, but the guy they think steps up and is able to give the team a bit more is James Scott, 6'11" big man that comes over from College of Charleston with Pat Kelsey, and he's been able to log for the team thus far this season about 7 points, 4.5 rebounds. Even though he didn't play a lot at Charleston last season, he's been able to take that stride forward to the ACC. So far, so good out of him, and I do think that you're going to get good, clean, flowing offense in general. And Noah Waterman stands 6'10", 6'11" himself. He's a little bit more of a versatile big man, but you're able to have him down low, be able to give you a little bit of rebounding as needed as well. Chucky Epper and Rain Smith, these two guys are combined for 28 points per game, and Smith has been able to shoot north of 40% from three-point range. Hepburn has done a nice job be able to flow the offense, and on the flip side, you got an Ole Miss team that I do think that their lack of size is going to hurt them a little bit as well. Jamin Brakefield has been able to give you about 6 rebounds per game, so he's going to be able to help out a little bit on that front, but I was just expecting a little bit more out of some of the younger guys on this team, like John Bull has only seen 2 games thus far this season. He was a top 100 freshman at 7'2" that I thought was going to be able to step in there, give you a little bit more on the glass. Malik Diaz able to give you 7.6 boards per contest as well, but all in all, I do take a look at this ordeal. Even though Ole Miss is doing a better job protecting the ball, I do think that Louisville going to get on track with their 3-point shooting. I do think that the Louisville defense has been very good, as in regulation. They have given up fewer than 70 points in pretty much all their games aside from the Tennessee game. Gets the job done. Do think that both of these teams execute relatively well on offense as well, so I set my total 151. I like the over, and I'm going to lay it with Louisville. 653, 654 on the betting board. Grand Canyon is playing us Hawaii. The Rainbow Warriors are an underdog of 13.5 to 14 points, and tonight's game is 143 to 143.5. Did set this line at 14.5. I'm willing to lay up to 14 with Grand Canyon. For Hawaii, having to travel away from the mainland, I think is going to take a lot out of them, as that's a lot of travel to be going through. And for Grand Canyon, it's been a less than tremendous start to the season for them, but I do think that they're going to be able to get back on track with having Tyon Grant Foster, one of the most gifted players in all of college basketball, right now supplying for the team 16.5 points, 7 boards. Last year was better than the 28% three-point shooting that he's got this season, but do think that that's going to be going in the right direction. The biggest thing is cleaning up the 14-plus turnovers per game, and Jacoby Coles is a good deodorant to whatever stink you've got. He comes in from TCU, 18 points, 6.5 boards, 2.5 assists per game, and then the likes of a Duke Brandon, who missed the first 4 or so games of the season. Also being able to supply 7+ rebounds per game for a team that last year was in the top 55 with regards to rebound rate is going to be big, because pretty much all that Hawaii has this season has been on the glass. It's Tanner Christensen. He comes in from Idaho. He's been able to give you about 7.5 rebounds per game. Gatis Namasika has been able to give you about 12.7 boards. So he's been able to do a solid job, and he comes in from Xavier. He's able to shoot it well from 3-point range. And for Hawaii, they're doing the little things well. They're only turning the ball over about 9.5 times per game, but with this Grand Canyon team, I do think that they're going to be able to just take it to them down low. I do think that the backcourt with Rayshon Harrison still being able to give you 13+ points per game, that they're going to be able to sort out all the kinks, as this was a Grand Canyon team that coming into the season, we thought that they were going to be one of the top major teams in all of college basketball, perhaps a top 25 team, have yet to be able to live up to that billing. Do think that they start to be able to get things turned around against a Hawaii team that, away from the mainland, I think that it's going to be very difficult travel for them. So I'm going to be willing to lay with Grand Canyon. I did set them as a 14.5 point favorite and did set my total at 144.5. We've seen Grand Canyon be a little bit wonky with regards to their defense in Hawaii. Even though they haven't necessarily shot it great from 3 this far, they've been able to get clean possession. So in on the over, and I'm going to be willing to lay with Grand Canyon. 655, 656 on the betting board. It is Utah Tech, and they're on the road. They're facing off against Boise State, as Boise State does find themselves at sizable 23.5 to 24-point favorites. The last game is 145.5. Did set my line at 25. I'm going to be willing to lay this number with Utah Tech. They just have not impressed me at all this season. They're a team that relies very much on their 3-point shooting, and they're currently shooting less than 27% from 3-point range. You've got Beyond Riley, who's got some good versatility, 8.5 boards, 14.5 points. He doesn't necessarily have a lot of size, though, and for Utah Tech, just across the board, they don't have a lot of size. Tennessee Rainwater is able to give you about 8 or so points per contest, and that's actually his name, Tennessee Rainwater. But that said, you've got a pair of guys that I really like in Tyson Dagenhart, along with Javon Buchanan, who have been 6'7", versatile players with Buchanan currently shooting 50% from three-point range. Dagenhart, he's right now been shooting less than 15% from three. He should be able to pick it up. 16.5 points, 6 boards out of him, while Buchanan, 14 points per game. He's been able to come in and just give this team a lot of production. A combined 52 points in the last two contests. And for Boise State, unlike a season ago where they had no point guard whatsoever, Alvaro Cardenas has done a nice job of running the offense, just being able to get the ball to the open man. 10 points, 5.5 assists. Last year shot 38.5% from three-point range at San Jose State. That's been down to just 30%, and Boise State has been able to have all their success despite the fact that they're only shooting about 32% from three. They do the little things well, shooting north of 80% at the free throw line. As a matter of fact, each of their top 5 scorers have all been able to shoot at least 76.9% at the free throw line, with Omar Stanley giving you a block, 6 boards, 9.5 points per game. Not necessarily a team with a ton of depth, but Emmanuel Ugbo, he's able to give you a little bit more than when you had a season ago from like guy number 6, guy number 7, when they had truly no depth. And for Utah Tech, it's been a case where they've actually protected the ball quite well. 10.5 turnovers per game. They just have not been able to take very good shots. Noe Gonsalves, he's been able to give you 13 points per game with really nothing to be able to combat things down low, and having Hakeem Bird just not looking like the same three-point shooter that he was a few seasons ago when he was over at Marist. Right now giving you 8 points per contest. I do think that it's going to be a rough go of it for a Utah Tech team that has been one of the worst teams offensively in all of college basketball, and for this Utah Tech team, they have been able to break the 70-point plateau against D1 competition because they played a few games against non-D1 competition just once thus far this season. Now, I did set my total at 147. I do think that for Utah Tech, they start to click a little bit more with their shooting, but I also do think that there's going to be a rise with Boise State's three-point shooting and could become a little bit of an open gym blowout. So willing to lay it with Boise State and in on the over. 657, 658 on the betting board. It is Clemson and they play us Kentucky, as Kentucky a 1 to 2 point favorite. And your total on this game between 156.5 to 157. I do think that the home court advantage is going to be very key here. I set Clemson as a 1.5 point favorite. I've loved what I've seen out of Kentucky this far this season, as in their home games they've been able to get past the 90-point plateau on pretty much all but one of those games thus far this season. Do want to see how they look a little bit more on the road. Their first real away from home test against Duke, they were able to do a nice job there, but now they have to go into Little John, where Clemson has been very efficient themselves. Chase Hunter has really impressed me with his 16 points per contest. And for Kentucky, big question is Amari Williams. How does he fare against Ian Shefflin, who's right now supplying 12.5 points, 11.5 boards, a block, a steal per game, and has also been very dynamic as a big man, doling out 3.5 assists per game. That actually leads the way for Clemson, even though you've got Jaden Zachary, who comes over from Boston College. 2 steals, 3 assists, 8 points per contest, has at one point in his career been north of a 40% three-point shooter. They're doing all this with not even getting a ton of some of the ancillary pieces like Jake Heidbreder or Miles Foster, who have combined for about 8 points per contest between the two of them. So I like the depth that Clemson is able to provide for Kentucky. Kobe Brea has been one of the best outside shooters in all of college basketball, really for a few years running now, shooting 61% from three, but again, should be seeing that go southward. I do have my trepidation still with Kirk Kriisa. He's done a really nice job of becoming a pass-first guy. He's only giving you 4.5 points per game, but 4.3 assists to only about 1 turnover per contest, but sometimes we see Kirk Kriisa just pop up at the wrong moments. You've got a lot of guys who are able to give you 12 plus points per contest. Lamont Butler, Jackson Robinson, they've been rock solid on that front, and Ortega Owe, he's been able to do a nice job being that main scorer with 16 points per game, shooting 42% from three, but again, could see a little bit of regression here. It's a Kentucky team that's done a nice job of being able to take care of the ball, but now they go up against a Clemson team that's got good size along the perimeter. I think that they're going to be able to contest those threes. I do think that Clemson, with having what they've got down low in Shefflin, find a way to be able to get the job done. Did set my total at 153.5. You've got a Clemson team that is typically very efficient on offense, but they've been looking very rock solid with regards to their defense, giving up 58 or fewer in now 3 out of their last 4 games, and they held a very high-octane Penn State team to 67 points, so I do think that this is going to be slowed down. And Kentucky, in their own right, they've been relatively rock solid on defense as well when needed as well. So I'm going to be looking at the under, and with Clemson, like them outright on the money line. 659, 660 on the betting board. Stanford is going to be playing out to Utah Valley, and Utah Valley is an underdog of 12 to 12.5 points. Total on this game is 142, and for Stanford, set them as a 13.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the 12 for Stanford. It's been a case of Maximine Reynaud just doing absolutely amazing things for this team. He stands 7 feet tall. He's able to pop it in about a 40% clip from three-point range, north of 12 points and 11 rebounds per game. Now, Samford's going to be a little bit angry after they lose to Cal Poly at home in their last game, and Utah Valley last year was one of the worst teams in all of college basketball in terms of their three-point shooting. They did a nice job hitting the transfer portal, and they added a lot of versatility, but they also added guys that sometimes turn the ball over a little bit too much, north of 15 turnovers per game. Now, I like what you're able to get out of the Wellings, with Carter Welling being the main man. He comes in from UC Irvine, where he was a part-time starter last year, 15 points, 7 boards. He's right now shooting 50% from three-point range at 6'10". Again, should be seeing a little bit of a drop-off there. And then his brother, Hayden Welling, he was over at Irvine as well. He's come in, he's given the team 8 points. He's shooting 40% from three-point range. Again, probably going to see a little bit of a fall-off there, but Dominic Nelson, he's been able to do a nice job helping this team out with his versatility, 13.5 points, 6.5 boards per game. You've been able to get a little bit of facilitation with 5.5 assists and 8 points per game out of Trayvon Leinhardt, but with this Samford team, with having Reynaud doing all that he's doing, and I undersold him, he's giving you more like 23 points per contest. Him being able to pair up with Josiah Sellers, who's been able to supply 14 points along the perimeter, shooting about 34.5% from three-point range. It's Samford doing the little things well. That's much of what Nerdball, Kyle Smith's system, is built around. They only turn the ball over 9.5 times per game. They're generating turnovers with about 9 steals per game, with Jalen Blakes giving out 5.5 assists to 1.1 turnovers per game, being able to generate about 2.5 steals per game. And then the freshman, Aiden Kaman, has been able to give you a little bit more down low as well. He's been able to log for the team 4+ rebounds in each of the last 4 games. He's giving you a little bit of facilitation at 6'10", so that stretchability is very big. Chisholm Okpara, the transfer from Harvard, starting to come along for the ride. I do think that Samford are going to start to shoot a little bit better than 31.5% from three-point range. In Utah Valley, while they do a really nice job with their defense down low, they do leave a little bit of something to be desired with regards to their perimeter shooting, as opponents from three-point range against Utah Valley this season are shooting right in that neighborhood of about 38.5%. That is 338th in all of college basketball. So that, in my opinion, will allow Samford to be able to tear this game up and be able to get the job done against Utah Valley. So going to be willing to lay the 12 here, and I did set my total at a 141.5. Utah Valley, do think it's going to do a good job on the glass, and I do think that Samford is going to be able to slow this game down under the Kyle Smith style. So in on the under, and I'm willing to lay with Samford, 661, 662 on the betting board. Another game that I wrote up, as LSU is going to be playing against Florida State. Florida State a 3.5 to a 4-point underdog, with your total on this game anywhere between 149.5 to a 150. And I wrote up LSU. I'm willing to lay up to 7 points with LSU. I do think that they're going to be able to do a nice job against the Florida State team that has really been reliant upon turnovers to be able to get their offense going. And to the credit of Florida State, they're a top 10 team in all of college basketball in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. But their games against Tarleton State, along with Western Carolina, I do think have very much warped their numbers. Now, it was impressive them being able to take down both Temple and UMass a few weeks ago, but Jameer Watkins has had to be the heart and soul of this team, and he has been 17 points, 4.5 rebounds, shooting in the mid-30s from three-point range. But this is also a unit that they turn the ball over 13 times per game. They're not necessarily the world's greatest shooting team in really any aspect, like what Malik Ewan is starting to provide down low. Number 1 junior college transfer, according to JUCOrecruiting.com. He's right now logging 10 points, 5.5 rebounds per game, and has been able to throw in their 4+ rebounds in each of the last 5 games, and double figures in terms of scoring in each of the last 5 as well. But on the flip side for LSU, Jalen Reed has been a really nice versatile piece as well. 12.5 points, 7.5 boards at 6'10". He's currently shooting 50% from three-point range. He's done a really good job of being able to fortify things in terms of his shot blocking as well. A little bit over a block per contest. LSU certainly going to need to clean up the turnovers, as they have been turning the ball over this year right around about 14 times per contest. But you do have Jordan Sears, who's been really getting better with every single game from what I've seen. 15 points, 3 assists, stealing at per contest for a LSU unit that each of their top 3 scorers are shooting at least 40% from three-point range, with Cam Carter coming on over from Kansas State, 16.5 points, 4 boards, shooting 40% from three-point range. And Deji Bailey, he was at Richmond a season ago. Didn't have high expectations for him, but at 6'5", he's been a good facilitator with 3 assists, 4.5 rebounds, 10 points. He's able to be like a, not necessarily point forward. He doesn't have quite that sort of size, but a little bit of a larger point guard for this team. Derek Fountain being out for a little bit of time has been hurting the team down low. But for Florida State, even though they play a lot of guys just in general, they don't necessarily have the depth and the just, I guess you could call it, level of talent with that depth that we've seen in past years. Guys like Boston Hole, Chandler Jackson, they're just not what they've had in the past. And I do think that LSU is going to be able to find a way to get it done in a game that I think is going to be pretty frenetic and up and down. Semi-total 153.5. Do like the over, and I'm willing to lay it with LSU. Did that for the write-up. 663, 664 on the betting board. Another game that made my write-up says UTSA meet for the Roadrunners. They hit the road to face off against St. Mary's. St. Mary's a 23.5 point favorite. Total on this game between 144 to 144.5. Did write up UTSA with the points. I set them as an 18.5 point underdog. I think that there's real upside here with UTSA as these pieces that come in from the transfer portal start to mesh together. You've got a nice go-to scorer in Primo Spears, who's been able to supply 24 points per contest. Now, he's turned the ball over a little bit north of 3 times per game, but overall, you look at this UTSA team, and they've been able to give you north of 80% free throw shooting. That is a top 12 mark in all of college basketball. They're doing a nice job down low as well. Top 50 team with regards to percentage of missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. They bring in from Buffalo the transfer in Genavia Smith, who stands 6'9". Last year actually shot 37% from 3-point range, 7 points, but north of 10 rebounds per game. Marcus Millender has been able to give you a bit of facilitation with 3.5 assists, 11 points per game, and Damari Monsanto. You need to get him online, but when he's been a good shooter, he has been one of the better ones in all of college basketball. Going against the St. Mary's team that they've had a little bit of a rough go of it with their offense here in the early part of the season. I feel like that Cal Poly game was able to help them find their bearings and their sea legs, and do like the progression that we've seen out of Mikey Lewis, who's as a freshman been able to give the team 14.5 points per game. He hasn't necessarily given you as much scoring recently, but a little bit more facilitation with 3 assists in that win against USC. That was something that I'd like to see. And for St. Mary's overall, they're shooting about 32.5% from 3. They just don't have quite as much scoring as they did last season with Aiden Mahaney in terms of from the outside. They're doing a better job from the inside, though, as you've been able to get 9.5 boards, 13.5 points out of 6'8" Paulius Miroskis, who comes over from Lithuania, and he last year actually shot north of 50% from 3-point range. I think that was a little bit of an outlier, but you've got Mitchell Saxon, who still gives you 7 rebounds per game. Luke Barrett has stepped up down low with a steal, 7.5 rebounds, 10.5 points per game. It's the St. Mary's team that's a well-oiled machine, and they're going to be able to get the job done, but I think that Austin Clonch is a really good coach, starting to be able to figure out what he's all got with this Roadrunners team, and I do think that UTSA and their just overall firepower and offense going to be able to keep them lively in this game. Did set my total at 146.5. St. Mary's has been doing a much better job of getting the ball inside and playing just a little bit faster than in past years at UTSA, looking to absolutely gun it under Austin Clonch, so in on the over, and I wrote up the points with UTSA. This is the last game on the normal Las Vegas betting board before we hit the extra games. This is 665, 666. Washington is on the road against UCLA. UCLA is a 13-point favorite. Totals between 136.5 to a 137.5, and for UCLA, I did set them as a favorite of 13.5 points. Don't want to go past the 13, but I'm going to be willing to lay it with Washington. They've got Great Osabor, who has been a great. He's been able to give the team 15-plus points, 7-plus rebounds, gives you a little bit of facilitation as well, but this Washington backcourt just, frankly, has not been good this season. You've got Osabor as right now your main facilitator, and he's leading the team on pretty much every single statistic possible. Tyler Harris, who comes over from Portland at 6'8", good versatility. Right now, give you 6.5 boards, 14 points per game, shooting 48% from 3-point range, but you're right now relying a lot on Zoom Diallo to be able to carry this backcourt, and he's just not able to right now. 10 points per game, he's able to be a nice ancillary piece. Makai Mason, who comes over from Rice, he's been able to give you about 6.5 points per contest, but when he was at Rice last year, he was able to give you 3 assists, a little bit more from the outside. That just hasn't translated this year as they're still looking for that main point guard, and for UCLA, this is currently the top defense in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis in all of college basketball. The Daily Show, Eric Daly, has been very versatile. Steal and a half, 12.5 points, 5.5 boards, shooting north of 40% from 3-point range. And 6'9", Tyler Bilodeau, he comes over from Oregon State. He's really been a nice diamond in the rough find. 14 points, shooting 36% from 3-point range for a UCLA team that still has a few things to sort out with regards to their backcourt, but Dylan Andrews, who missed a few games a little bit earlier in the season, he's not necessarily been able to give you as much scoring pop from the outside as a season ago, but 8 points, he's doling out 4 assists per game, he's keeping things relatively clean for a UCLA team that's generating north of 10 steals per game. They're turning the ball over about 11.5 times per contest. That's pretty acceptable, and Kobe Johnson has really accepted his role coming in from USC, about 3.5 assists, 5.5 boards, 7.5 points per game. I do think that UCLA, with their improved backcourt forward play, along with guys like William Kyle and company. They're able to do a nice job crashing the glass, should be able to get the job done against a Washington State team that just seems rudderless at this point. I do think that UCLA defense going to be firing on all cylinders once again, so I am in on the under, and I'm willing to lay up to 13 with UCLA. Now we hit the extra games.
The normal betting board picks are complete, but there are some extra games today, so we go into the bonus.
306-501, 306-502. It is Delaware playing us at Delaware State, and Delaware State finds themselves as 12-point underdogs. Total on this game is 148.5. Another game that I wrote up as I feel like Delaware should be a 17.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay. Now with Delaware, a little bit of trepidation with regards to their ball security, as this has been a team that has turned the ball over north of 12 times per contest, but I do feel like they're a little bit of lack of size, not going to be really exploited by a Delaware State team that they have not done the world's greatest job on the glass thus far. You've got Kasim Watson, who's been able to supply the team with about 6.5 rebounds per game. Austin Andrews, he has been in and out of the fold, and when he's been out there, he's only given the team 5 boards and 3 points per game. I like Martez Robinson. He's honestly one of the better mid-major players that you're going to find. 16.5 points, 6.5 boards, good versatility, shoots 39% from 3-point range, but there's not a lot around him for a Delaware State team as currently well outside the top 250 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and it feels like Delaware is starting to find their bearings. Kevon Riley, after a little bit of a rough start to the season, he's now shooting 38.5% from the outside, and Delaware as a whole, they're shooting 37.5% from 3-point range. They face off against a Delaware State team that is not doing the world's greatest job of being able to guard from the perimeter. Delaware State also very undisciplined with how much they are fouling, and that's big for a Delaware team that is currently 12th in the country in terms of their free throw shooting percentage. These guys have a collective have been very good, as each of your top 5 scorers are shooting at least 80.5% at the free throw line, with John Camden leading the way, 17.5 points, 4.5 boards, currently shooting 47.5% from 3-point range. That should be taking a little bit of a downward tick, but with this Delaware State unit, it's just been really rough in terms of the guys outside of Robinson. You've been able to get about 13.5 points, 3.5 assists out of a guy that has a little bit of upside in Robert Smith, but all in all, I do take a look at Raymond Somerville not really being able to be that guy down low that's really able to elevate the post, and I do think that for Delaware, they should be able to get the job done relatively handily here. So I did write up the Delaware Blue Hens laying the number, and did set my total at 153.5 in on the over, and I'm willing to lay it with Delaware. 306-503, 306-504. Presbyterian is on the road facing off against Florida A&M. Florida A&M is a 5.5 to a 6-point underdog. Total on this game, 137.5. Set Presbyterian as an 8-point favorite. So I am going to be willing to lay it with Presbyterian. For Florida A&M, I like the guys that they brought in the offseason. I like the coaching change that they made as they turned things over to the St. Thomas of the NAIA ranks out there in Texas, sort of coaches that they've got out there. But that said, this is also a Florida A&M team that's just very bare bones right now. Milton Matthews has been leading the way with 11.5 points per game. They do have Shakir O'Neal. That's actually the son of Shaquille O'Neal. Give you 9 points, 4 boards, but this is a just system in general that relies upon good hardcore defense. It relies upon having a bit of size, and right now they just don't have a whole heck of a lot of that. O'Neal has been able to give you darn near a block per contest, but this also is a team that's just not valuing the ball on offense. Turn the ball over 15.5 times per game. Meanwhile, Corey Mincy on the flip side for Presbyterian, 4 assists, steal and a half, 14 points per game, shooting 42% from 3 for a Presbyterian team that, as a whole, they've been able to shoot darn near 40% from the outside. Jonah Pierce, he should be able to win the battle down low. 7 boards, 13 points per game. Kobe Stewart has been able to give you 13.5 points per game. You've got some really good depth with this team, with a few guys being able to come in, being able to give you like 7 points per contest. I've been liking what I've been seeing out of Jemiah Harvey, who's come in and he's been rock solid. Jalen Peterson, great name, 6'7". He's able to give you 6 points, few rebounds per game as well. And then you've got Iverson King. He transfers into the program as well. He's come on over, and he's been able to give you about 6 points at 6'6". A little bit of versatility out of him. Currently shooting north of 50% from 3-point range. Do think that Presbyterian going to be able to force this Florida A&M team into some turnovers, and for Florida A&M, as bad as they are taking care of the ball, they don't generate like any turnovers whatsoever against C1 competition. 60 points or fewer in each of their last 3 games. So interesting little bit of circumstance here. I did set my total at 142. I do think that for Florida A&M, they're going to start to find it a little bit more against the Presbyterian team that is starting to experience a little bit more of an uptick with regards to their tempo. We saw them give up 90 points against Tennessee Tech, so in on the over. But I'm going to be willing to lay it with Presbyterian. 306-505, 306-506. It is Stetson on the road going against South Florida. South Florida, a 15 to 15.5 point favorite. Total on this game between 151 to 151.5. Set my line at 17.5, so going to be willing to lay it for Stetson. This is just a team that has not been able to guard the three-point line really for the last few seasons. Stetson, even when they made the NCAA tournament last year, was outside the top 275 in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis. This year, they're allowing opponents to shoot 39.1% from three-point range. That has been very much less than savory after they were outside the top 250 in this category a season ago. Stetson just doesn't have those top scorers from a season ago. They don't bring back a single guy. They average north of 2 points per game, so Abramo Kenka, who's been able to give you 11.5 points per game, has been their main scorer. You've got Mekhi Ellison, who has been able to give you 2.5 assists, 11 points per game, so he's been able to help out in the backcourt, shooting 37.5% from three-point range, but Stetson very much relies upon just being able to beat you in a three-point shooting war, and right now they're shooting 33% from three with 15 turnovers per game while playing not necessarily so up-tempo. And then Jamile Reynolds, with his 8 rebounds per game for South Florida, should be able to completely bludgeon a Stetson team that doesn't really have a lot of size down low. You've got Kassan Jennings, who has been part of a whole is greater than the sum of its parts backcourt of South Florida that has he, along with Kobe Knox, both being able to give you about 11 points per contest. You've been able to get a lot of production as well out of Jaden Reed, 3.5 assists, 10.5 points per contest. You've got Reed, who's right now shooting about 32% from three. That should be rising up as so far as a whole. They're shooting just 31.5% from the outside. Very clear that they're missing Chris Youngblood, but I do think that that'll be shooting up as things go along, especially in this game against a Stetson team that they just can't guard the three to save their lives. And then you get an additional 6 rebounds per game out of Deontay Green, who's been able to give you some nice size down low. I do think that South Florida taking it to a Stetson team has been just absolutely brutal defensively, and they just don't have that three-point shooting identity like we've seen in the past, and they've also given up 85 plus points in 3 of their last 4 games. So circumstance where I'm going to be in on the over. I set my total at 153.5, and I'm willing to lay up to 17 with South Florida. 306.507, 306.508. Lipscomb is on the road facing off against Chattanooga. Chattanooga, a 1.5 point favorite. Your total on this game is between 150.5 to 152, and Chattanooga, I set them as a 2.5 point favorite. So going to be willing to lay the 1.5. I do think that for Chattanooga, we're going to see a rebound with their three-point shooting. This was a top 50 team in terms of their three-point shooting percentage a season ago, and this season against D1 competition, they're shooting well below 32% from three-point range. As we got a pair of guys that I think are going to be able to pick it up much like they did a season ago in Hunter Ruff along Trey Bonham. These two guys are combining for about 24.5 points per game, and both of these guys last year shot north of 38.5% from three. Currently shooting both about 26% from three-point range. Chattanooga is still not getting out of sorts with the ball. They're still doing the little things, shooting 76% the free throw line, throwing the ball over 11 times per game, and they do have liabilities down low. You don't necessarily have a ton of size. You've got Badge Weiland, who's able to give you 13 points per game, has been a nice solid pickup coming in from Bellarmine, but you're going to need the freshman and Latif Diop, who's been able to give you 4 rebounds per game, to be able to be a little bit more of a elevator down low. Mekhi Richards, he had 6'10", still only pulling in there about 3 rebounds per game after he was at Pacific a season ago. So you're going to need to get a little bit more down low, but it's not like they're facing off against some Lipscomb team that has ideal size either. Jacob Inyesevic has been very good with his versatility. 2 years ago was the top scorer for Lipscomb last year, missed the entirety of the season, but it's come back, giving the team 18 points, 7.5 boards, shoots in the mid-30s from three-point range, and Lipscomb should see a rise in their three-point shooting as well. Last year, they shot well north of 36% from three, and they're shooting 30.7% from the outside. Will Pruitt, for 6'3", is able to give you 5 boards, 13 points per game. Like his game, Josiah Boom Boom Powell, who comes on over from Jacksonville, he's been able to give you about 10.5 points per contest as well. So I do think that both of these teams are going to be able to run some very nice, clean offense. I do think that both of these teams see a tick up with regards to their three-point shooting, but both of these teams are also running at a lower tempo than they did a season ago as well. So I did set my total at 150.5. I'm in on the under, but with that said, with Chattanooga, I do think that their backcourt just elevates a little bit more than Lipscomb, and I think that home court advantage is going to be very key. So I want to lay up to 2 with Chattanooga, and I'm in on the under. 306.509, 306.510. Charleston Southern plays us at UT Martin. UT Martin is a 4.5 point underdog with your total 143 to 143.5, and with UT Martin, I set them as a 5 point dog. I'm willing to lay it. You have to fear a little bit of a letdown spot for Charleston Southern. They come off of that massive win against Miami. This is really their biggest win since they knocked off Ole Miss like a decade or so ago. That's when Son Nimley hit like a game winner for Charleston Southern that season. He's now the coach of this team, so he knows what it's like to be able to have success at the Charleston Southern program, and I think that he's going to have these boys focused, as you got Tajay Kelly, who should be able to do a nice job down low with 15.5 points, 7.5 boards. Battle's going to be a little bit tough, as Vladimir Saldizde, he comes on over from the country of Georgia. He's been a well-traveled man that started out at East Florida A&M. He was playing under this very same coaching staff in the early goings, went on over to UC Riverside, and he had 6'7", has been a relatively good rebounder. And for UT Martin, this is a team that they're in the top half of all of college basketball with regards to their rebound rate. Their defense has been pretty solid, Problem is, they're right now shooting 27.5% from three with 14.5 turnovers per game. The offense is completely disjointed. You've got a top 75 junior college transfer according to JUCOrecruiting.com and Josu Gurion, who's been able to give you 17 points, 4 boards, shooting 38.5% from three-point range. But outside of Gurion, you've got absolutely nobody that's giving you anything offensively. As Terrence Gunyard, he's been able to give you about 10 points, 4.5 boards, and that's been about it for the team, as this is a team that is under the tutelage of Jeremy Ballard, who comes over from East Florida A&M. He's brought in a lot of these junior college transfers, and it's taking them a little bit of time to be able to find their sea legs. Meanwhile, Charleston Southern, RJ Johnson is able to give you 12 points, dole it out with 4.5 assists, shooting 45% from three. For a Charleston Southern team that they've got some things to figure out as well. 29% three-point shooting, turning the ball over 14 times per game. But I think that Lamar Odin Jr., the Drexel transfer, is only giving you 7 points per game, is going to be able to see a rise as the season goes along. And they've gotten some nice unexpected production out of Dalen Berry. He's come in from Charlotte. He's been able to log for the team 11 points, 5 boards, 4 assists after Charlotte just did not give him any playing time last season. So at a 4.5 or less, going to be willing to lay with Charleston Southern. I did set my total at 149. I do think that both of these teams are going to step it up offensively. And you've got a UT Martin team that it feels like they're really looking to run. So going to be in on the over, and I'm going to be willing to lay with Charleston Southern. 3-6-5-11, 3-6-5-12. You've got New Hampshire playing against Dartmouth. Dartmouth, a 2.5 to a 3-point road favorite, and your total is between 141 to 141.5. With Dartmouth, I set them as a 1.5 point underdog. I like New Hampshire outright on the money line. Dartmouth coming off of a very successful weekend where they were able to knock off Boston College, but I still need to see a little bit more from this Dartmouth team. For Dartmouth, they have been able to have Brandon Mitchell-Day be able to give you a tad bit down low, but he's not firing out cylinders the way that he did 8 seasons ago. Last season was more of a double-figure score. This year giving you just 9.5 points, 4.5 boards, doing a little bit more to help dole out good, clean offense with about 3 assists per game, and is shooting it well from 3, but this is also a Dartmouth team that I feel like they've shot above their heads a little bit from 3-point, shooting 37% from 3 this year. After a season ago, they shot just 30.5% from 3-point range. They've had a few moving pieces, but it's not like they brought in 100 billion different guys that are now all of a sudden just different guys in general. Ryan Cornish is back from a season ago. He's been able to give the team 13.5 points, 3 assists per contest. Kate Haskins has been really good with about 15 points per contest. He's been able to really elevate the Dartmouth offense, but that's up for New Hampshire. I do think that Anthony McComb, who comes on over from Bowling Green, is able to give you 15 points per contest, is going to be able to match up in the backcourt. And then in the front court, it's a whole greater than some of its parts approach. You don't have anyone other than Emmanuel Okpomo, who's giving you north of 4.2 rebounds per game. They've been dealing with the injury to Trey Woodyard. He was pretty much the top returning scorer from a season ago, but even with him out, they still have some really good versatility along the outside, as the man from Italy and Davide Pozze has been able to give you 6.5 points at 6'4". He's been able to shoot 47.5% from 3-point range, and that's been big because they've been dealing with quite a few injuries. Semi Pasisis, he's missed a game or two, but has been able to return, and he's been able to be the main facilitator with about 3 assists, 4 boards, 10.5 points per game, so he's impacting the game in a wide variety of ways. I do think that they're going to do a good job of being able to guard the arc, as New Hampshire last 2 seasons has been a top 50 team in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. Had a little bit of a rough go of it against Columbia and Fordham, but do think that they're going to once again do a nice job being able to guard that 3-point line. New Hampshire, they've had a very tough time with their offense, but I do think that they find just enough to be able to get the job done in this one. Set my total at a 137.5, so I'm in on the under, and I do like New Hampshire outright on the money line. 3-6-5-13, 3-6-5-14. It is Lemoyne playing us Army. Army is a 1 to 1.5 point favorite, and your total on this game, it is 143.5, and with Lemoyne, I set them as a 3-point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to take them as a money line underdog at home. For Army, it has been a group that has really been able to get so much better after last year. They had darn near nothing that returned. They get back Jalen Rucker, their top scorer from 2 seasons ago, and he's starting to pick it up right where he left off 2 seasons ago. 17.5 points per game. Ryan Curry has become a nice main facilitator with 4 assists, 11.5 points per contest right now, shooting 50% from 3-point range. And Army last year was well outside the top 3 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Right now they're shooting 36.5% from 3, turning the ball over just 11 times per game, but some things always remain the same at Army. They're shooting 67.5% the free throw line. That's a little bit of a liability for them. Now, they do have down low AJ Allenpatch, who at 6'8", he's done a nice job hauling in there about 8.5 rebounds per game, and Lemoyne is going to have a tough time with that, as right now Dwayne Karama has been that top guy, being able to give you about 5.5 rebounds per game. But let's say for Owens, who has been in and out of the fold, he's expected to play in this one, and he's been able to give them a little bit of a spark as well. When he's been out there for his 5 games, he has been able to give you about 7 or so rebounds per game, and I do think that Fred Paulus Bagatis, who who he's missing for the last few games. He has a chance to be able to play in this one. If he does, he can be able to provide a little bit more down low, but really the X factor here, Robbie Carmody. He comes on over after he was a starter at Mercer last season where he shot 39% from three-point range, was a little bit slow out of the gate. Has given the team 13 plus points in each of the last 3 games, has been able to emerge as a guy that they can count on in the backcourt. As Zach Tekken, he's not a good shooter, but he's a good facilitator, giving you about 4.5 assists per game. Comes in from Siena. He's been able to do a nice job of being able to flow the offense, but was a little bit limited due to injuries with the pieces that he had around him to begin the season. Now that you've got AJ Dantzler shooting north of 40% from three-point range back in the fold as well, do think that this Lemoyne team finds just enough to be able to find a way to be able to get the job done in this one. It's a Lemoyne team that's looking to push a little bit more tempo now. Army is a little bit more of a slow and controlled team, albeit one that has been playing a whole lot better on offense this season than in the past. They've been able to get to at least 79 points in each of their last 5 games, but we've also got a Lemoyne team that I think is going to be able to find it a little bit more defensively as well. So did set my total at 139. I'm in on the under, and I do like this Lemoyne team outright on the money line. 306-515, 306-516. It is Winthrop on the road against Queens NC. Another game that I wrote up. Queens is a 3.5 to 4-point underdog. This game between 154.5 to a 155.5. This is one where I'm going to be taking the road favorite. I set Winthrop as a 6.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number with this Winthrop unit. It's been up and down for them to say the least this season. They're going to need to clean up the north of 12 turnovers per game that they've been having, but I do like that for Winthrop. You've got a lot of guys that have been in this program for 3+ years. You've got Kelton Telford, who's been able to supply north of 14 points per contest, does a nice job being able to hit the boards, and that's something that Queens is going to need to deal with. Queens just does not have that one guy that's able to really give you too much outside of Malcolm Wilson. Wilson has been able to supply the team with about 7 or so rebounds per game. Nobody else on the roster giving north of 4.6 rebounds per game. Now, you do have some good versatility with Bryce Cash. He had 6 of 5, 5.5 points, 4.5 boards, 3.5 assists, just a real nice stat sheet suffer in general for this team, but Queens NC last year had much better three-point shooting around them. This year they're shooting 29.5% from 3. You really don't have anyone on the roster that's shooting above 34.5% from three-point with Yov Berman, who he comes in as a gentleman from Israel, being able to give you 7.5 points. He's been shooting 35% from 3, and he's been really their lone outside force. They have been able to get about 12 points per contest out of Ajon Anderson, who he's been able to do a solid job, giving you about 11.5 points per game. But again, not a guy that's really going to elevate and shoot from three-point range, and that's a way that you're able to knock off this Winthrop team, as I do think that Winthrop is going to be able to win that battle down low. They do have their liabilities in terms of being able to guard the three-point line, as Winthrop thus far this season has a lot of opponents to shoot about 35.5% from three-point range on the road. But with this Winthrop unit, you've also been able to have KJ Doucette be able to give you 14 points, 6.5 boards. It's a Winthrop team that they themselves are only shooting about 29% from three-point range, but do think that that should be going northward as the season goes along. In Kason Harrison being able to give you 3.5 assists, 14.5 points per game, and being a guy that can be an outside force himself, I do think it allows Winthrop to be able to get the job done. Did set my line at a 6.5, so wrote up Winthrop laying the number, and I set my number at a 152.5 in terms of the total. Queens NC not playing quite as fast as they have in past seasons, and both of these teams really struggling from three-point range, so in on the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay it with Winthrop. 306-517, 306-518. UNC Asheville on the road against George Mason. George Mason is a 13.5 point favorite. Total on this game between 140.5 to a 141. To set George as a 14.5 point favorite, I'm going to be willing to lay up to 14 with UNC Asheville. The backcourt for this team is still very good, but they lose everything that they had down low from a season ago. You lose Nick McMillan, you lose a guy that I thought was just absolutely tremendous in Drew Pember, and that leaves a big giant hole that is tough to be able to fill. Josh Banks has been able to be the top scorer for the team, 16 points, 5 boards, currently shooting 43.5% from three-point range, while Fletcher Abey, nice off-the-ball scorer, shooting north of 45% from 3, 13.5 points per contest. Toya Solomon, he's been able to log about 8 boards and a little bit over a block per game, but just doesn't have that versatility like Pember did a season ago. And really outside of your main 4 guys, the other guy being Jordan Marsh, who's able to give you 14.5 points per game. Don't have anyone else that's really giving you meaningful contributions for the team. It's a team without a lot of depth. And then for George Mason, Darius Maddox has been able to supply the team with 14.5 points per game. For George Mason as a whole, they're only shooting about 32.5% from 3, and Maddox last year shot 40% from 3. Right now, that's about 30% from the outside. I do think that that's going to be going northward. And then Katie Johnson, what are you going to be able to get out of him? It's big. A former starter out in the SEC for Georgia, along with Auburn. Took him a few games to be able to get going, but I combined 27 points, 12 boards, 6 assists in the last 2 games. I like the way that he is heading, and he's right now shooting well north of 45% from three-point range, so has done a nice job on that front. George Mason, not the same team on the glass as they were 8 seasons ago. They've been relying upon Jarrett Phillips to be able to give them some nice rebounding. He's been able to supply about 7 rebounds per game, but it's very clear that Keyshawn Hall is missed for this team. But you do have Jalen Haynes, who 2 seasons ago was a starter at ETSU, where he was logging about 6.5 boards, 14.5 points per game. Not a guy that's going to stretch you out from the outside, but he's been able to give you about 5 rebounds per game for George Mason. Still a team that, much like last year, a top 75 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, playing very good, clean, efficient defense in games that have wrapped up in regulation, because they played that double overtime game against East Carolina. Really the only team to be able to get past 70 on them has been Marquette thus far this season. So I do think that George Mason finds a way to get the job done rather convincingly. I do think that that defense takes a little bit of a setback in this one, because Asheville, they're a very good offensive team, but they're also a team that's really given it up in terms of three-point shooting, and I think that George Mason sees a rise in their three-point shooting. So semi-total more around a 144.5 in on the over, and I'm willing to lay with George Mason, 3 of 6, 5-19, 3 of 6, 5-20. UNC Greensboro plays us High Point. High Point hopes to not be a low point as a 1-point underdog, and your total is between 136.5 to a 137. Set Greensboro as a 3.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the 1 to 1.5, and when it comes to Greensboro, I think that they're going to have a little bit of a tough time matching up down low with Jocelyn Bodu, but he has been very limited in terms of his offensive game and just hasn't been the same player that he was a season ago. Last year for Bodu, he was giving the team 2 blocks, 7 points, 9.5 rebounds per game. This year, 4.5 points, 7.5 boards, and 2 blocks per contest, and he was limited to just 13 minutes in their most recent game against a non-D1 team. Maybe it's because it was a little bit of bludgeoning, what have you, but I'm leaning towards there being perhaps something a little bit wrong with him, as we've seen that dip in production. Demarion Williams, he comes in after he actually began his career in the Big South at Gardner-Webb, spent some time over at Texas Tech. He's been tremendous, 16.5 points, 3.5 assists. You've got Abdoulaye Thiam, who's still a nice off-the-ball scorer, who's able to shoot darn near 40% from 3 in double figures, but this is also a Greensboro team that last 2 seasons they've been one of the better three-point shooting teams in all of college basketball. And Kenyon Giles, who he was playing over for Mike Jones while he was ever at Radford. I ask who, and you say Mike Jones. He was the coach over there, and now he's the coach over at UNC Greensboro. He's been able to give the team 14.5 points. He's able to maintain that outside presence with 43.5% three-point shooting, and the transfer from George Mason, Ronald Polite, doing a nice job, flowing some clean offense, 3.5 assists, 12 points per game. It's a bunch in UNC Greensboro. Turn the ball over just 11 times per game as well, and right now that's been a little bit costly for this High Point team. High Point last year was a really good high-octane offense that has been able to do a nice job of being able to be clean and efficient, but High Point, they just don't generate a lot of turnovers offensively. They're only turning the ball over about 11 times per game on the offensive side of things, but on defense, not being able to really cause a lot of pressure has been an issue. And Chase Johnson, after he had a really good showing for his first few games with High Point, he opened things up with 31 points against Coppin State. He has scored in single figures in every game ever since then. So I do like UNC Greensboro to get the job done. I'm willing to lay up to 3 with them. I did set my total at 141. I do think that both of these teams can have nice, clean offense in this one and knock down a few shots from the outside. So looking at the over, and I'm willing to lay with Greensboro, 3-6-5-21, 3-6-5-22. Vermont is going to be playing as a Brown. What can Brown do for you? Well, if they lose by 5 points or fewer, they'll make you money. They're 5.5 point underdogs against Vermont. Total on this game between 133 to a 134. And I set my number at a 5.5 as well. So we're going to be waiting on a little bit of line movement on this one. If we can get down to a 5 or less, I'd be willing to lay it with Vermont 6 or more. I'm going to be willing to take those points with Brown. And right now we've got a few places I think we saw a stray 5 or 2, and that would be my max buy point on Vermont. But this is a Brown unit that's in a lot of transition, much like Vermont is as well. For Vermont, they just have absolutely nothing down low, and this is never going to be a team that's going to be like physically imposing or anything like that. They're never going to be a team that just completely dominates you on that front. They just play good, clean, efficient defense, typically much with their backcourt. TJ Hurley has been able to give the team 14.5 points per game, and for Vermont, the team is shooting a collective 33% from three-point range. They just need to be a little bit better on that front. Jameer Bogues, not what he has been in past years, with about 8 points per game, as he's missed a few games this season. And for this Vermont team, you've had a lot of guys just be in and out of the fold. As Jace Roquemore, he missed 3 games a little bit earlier in the season. He should be all good to go in this one. He's one of the key pieces that the team is going to be relying upon. One of the few guys that has been out there in every game this season is Ali Ayoufale, who's been able to give you about 4.5 boards, 8.5 points per game at about 6'6", and He's right now the lone guy of the roster that's giving you 4+ rebounds per game. Meanwhile, for Brown, despite the fact that they're without Nana Owusu-Anane along with Kalu Anya from a season ago, you've been able to get a combined 16 rebounds per game out of Aaron Cooley along with Landon Lewis. These guys have really been able to step up. Cooley still able to shoot in the mid-30s from three-point range. Keno Lowley Jr. is going to be the top scorer in this game. 19 points on 47% three-point shooting. I do, though, think that John Becker over at Vermont, still one of the best coaches in all of college basketball. He's starting to get a lot of his injured pieces back, and this is still been a team that's been very rock solid on the defensive side of things. For Vermont, they got completely bludgeoned by Auburn, but I mean, that's the only team that has been able to score more than 71 points on them, so I do think that this is going to be a low-scoring slog of a game, set by total at 131.5. I'm in on the under, but for Vermont, would only be willing to lay up to 5 with them, 6 or more, taking the points with Brown. 306-523, 306-524. McNeese is playing against Santa Clara. Santa Clara, an underdog of 5 to 5.5 points. Total on this game between 142.5 to 143, and I did set my total at 145.5. I do like the over. McNeese, ever since Will Wade took over the program, they have been well outside the top 225 in terms of total possessions per game, but last year they were a top 40 team in terms of both points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis. I think that when it's all said and done for this McNeese team, they're going to be that once again, as Sincere Parker, off the bench for the most part, has been able to give you 17 points per game. He has been just absolutely tremendous with that regard. They deal with Alan Breed being out. He's only been able to play in 2 games thus far this season, so that's been hurting them a little bit. They do need a bit more out of Christian Shoemate. Last year, he's given the team 9+ rebounds per game. This year, that's only been about 5 rebounds per game, but Joe Charles, who comes on over from Louisiana, 6.5 points, 6.5 boards, does a nice job there for a McNeese team that is currently shooting just 29.5% from three-point range. That should be able to take up. And then for Santa Clara, it depends upon what night it is as to whether or not they're going to play tremendous defense, because for Santa Clara, they have been all around, and it has been very random as to what we've seen. In the last 5 games, they have given up 85 to Nevada, 54 to UC Riverside, 71 to Stanford, 52 to TCU, and then 76 to Washington. Like, this has been one of the most crazy teams we've seen in all college basketball this season. Adama Ball's been able to give you 12.5 points per game. Elijah Mahi, he comes in as a non-D1 transfer. He's actually been really good for this team. 13 points per contest for a Santa Clara team that they're shooting 31% from three-point range. They've got good size, and last year was one of the best rebound rate teams in all of college basketball. I expect that to be the same this year, but true 7-footer Christoph Tilley needs to give you more than 4 rebounds per game. He's been able to haul in there about 11.5 points per game. And part of the reason why this team has been all over the place is that they're trying to work Carlos Stewart Jr. back in the fold. He was with them 2 seasons ago. 2 years ago, was averaging 15 points per game. Spent last year at LSU as a injury-riddled year. And he's come back. He's only been able to give the team about 10.5 points per game, but he's been able to supply 38 points and 5 steals in the last 2 games. So it looks like he's starting to find it once again. I think that that's going to be key in Santa Clara being able to hold in this game, though. I do think that McNeese, in the end, they pull away a little bit too much, and I'm right now having trust issues with Santa Clara, as a lot of their games have come in the state of California. Now they have to head out to the great state of Louisiana. Do you think that road trip going to take a little bit out of them for a McNeese team that they themselves have been a little bit all over the place this season as well? So I did set my total at a 145.5. I think that you're going to see a lot of clean, efficient offense on both sides. I like the over, and I'm willing to lay it with McNeese, and wrap things up with 306-525, 306-526. SMU is going to be playing us to Alabama State. Alabama State, 19 to 20 point dogs. Total on this game is 156.5. Did set my total 153. I like the under. SMU has been playing at a very rapid pace, but I do think that they're going to be able to find their defense against an Alabama State team that, to their credit, they've been a better offensive team this year than they have been in past years, but still a team that over the last 3 seasons, if you look at combined field goal shooting percentages, they're in the bottom 15 in all of college basketball. You've got TJ Madlock, that is the son of Tony Madlock, really doing it all for this bunch. 13.5 points, 5.5 boards, 3.5 assists. Right now shooting 33% from 3. It's never been north of a 30.5% three-point shooter, but the problem is he's also right now leading the way in terms of rebounds as well with those 5.5 boards. And for SMU, you've got plenty of size for the team. Matt Cross, who comes on over from UMass, is able to give you 7 boards, a double-figure amount of points. Samet Yedoglu, the gentleman from Turkey at 7'2", he's able to give you 6+ boards, a little bit over a block per game. Not going to give you like anything in terms of 3-point shooting or anything like that, but good versatility for a big man in the post. Yohan Traore, he's able to stretch you out a little bit more. And then Kerry Oquendo along Chuck Harris are both shooting north of 45.5% from 3. Do you think that that's going to be going downward a little bit? It's a SMU team that is collective. They are shooting 38% from 3 with Boopy Miller doling out some really nice offense, 6 assists, 4 boards, 17 points per game. game. He was the main guy over at Wake Forest last season, and Wake Forest can tell you just how much they have been missing him thus far. And it is an SMU team that has left a little bit of something to be desired with their three-point shooting defense, but that's been more or less on the road. Away from home, they're allowing opponents to shoot north of 40% from three-point range. At home, that's just 29.7% from three-point range. Alabama State has been getting gashed a little bit from the outside, and for Alabama State, it's just a big question mark as to what you're going to be able to get out of Madlock, along with a guy that I like in C.J. Hines, who's been able to log 15.5 points per game. You've had Amar Knox be able to step up with about 15 points per game as well. Not necessarily shooting it well from the outside, though, and then down low, you just don't necessarily have a lot of size. Deontay Bass, who comes over from Georgetown, so only giving you about 3.5 rebounds per game. Just Stephen Walker does stand 6'10", but he's been rather limited in his game. 5.5 points, 3.5 boards, so he does have a little bit of stretchability and can pop it from three-point range. That said, do think that SMU is going to be able to take to Alabama State on the boards and be able to get the job done in a game that I think is going to be a little bit lower scoring, with SMU starting to pick it up just a tad on defense, holding Washington State to 60 points in their most recent outing. So I'm going to be looking at the under semi-total at 153 and one to lay up to 20.5 with SMU, and that'll wrap things up for the Tuesday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. Big thanks to Blake Lovell of Southeastern 16 for joining me in the last segment. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever you podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at @GNN_D1. Keep in mind, letters CM maybe does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other ways, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. I'm coming at you guys every single day throughout the college basketball season on this podcast, so I'm back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.
If your job at a healthcare facility includes disinfecting against viruses, you know prevention is the best medicine, and maintaining healthy spaces starts with a healthy cleaning routine. Grainger's world-class supply chain helps ensure you have the quality products you need when you need them, from disinfectants and cleaning supplies to personal protective equipment, so you can help deliver a clean bill of health. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.